Greetings! Allow me to welcome you to For the Love of Fiction, a podcast dedicated to discussing story and character across a wide range of mediums. I'm your host, Mark Tobit, and with me is my co-host, Gavin Groves.
Hello.
Hi, Gavin. How'd I do?
Well, I'm going to be honest. For some reason, the way you present, I sort of getting the impression of like a mastermind in a giant armchair. I'm going to be honest. There's like an evil tone in your voice. I just can't help but pick it up. When I do it, I try to come across as like warm and welcoming, but there was a sort of like now the power is not. There was sort of like now the power is mine kind of quality. Like I can't help but feel like I don't know. Maybe it's because I've known you so long, but like. You've always been the kind of person where, given the spotlight, is one to show off. It just feels like that's what.
It's not a million miles away from the truth. I'm going to be honest.
But yeah, I'm very, very well, thank you.
Glad to hear. What have you been up to of late, mate?
Well, actually, just recently, I read a very, very famous book called The Call of the Wild. Have you heard of this one?
No, I have not.
It's like the brother/sister novel of another really famous novel. It's more likely that you would have heard of the film adaptations of these books. But anyway, its partner novel is called White Fang. You heard of that?
Actually, now you say about it, Becca's talked about this movie, like about a movie called Call of the Wild, I think.
Yeah. Basically, it's about a dog, Buck, who is stolen from his home in where is it? I've got it here. Santa Clara Valley, California, and is forced into servitude as a sled dog in Alaska. And like, it's very much about the notion of like the heritage of this animal. You know, how like dogs have been turned into home animals, and yet there's still this like wild streak inside them. At certain points in the novel, like he starts to sort of remember. What is the phrase? He sort of starts to remember, has flashes of memory, should I say, of experiences from his ancestors.
Oh, like ancestral memory.
Yeah, like ancestral memory, I think is what you would call it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a really, really beautiful story and really beautifully written. It was published in 1903, so it's quite old. And like I might have mentioned before, that anything like animal related, it sort of like can't help but tug at my heartstrings. And there's a sequence where like Buck is like a sled dog, and he's like dealing with the pack mentality of like huskies, obviously, and he's not a husky himself. And he's been like treated really, really badly. And there's this other character whose name escapes me because terrible. Anyway, and basically this other character sees Buck being treated badly and rescues him from the bad owners, let's say. And there was a lot of talk in the reviews and the essays that I read about this novel about criticism, for good or for ill, about how Jack London sort of portrays the narrative of an animal. You know, in the end, this is human words to describe animal feelings, but like I actually feel like he like perfectly captures it. Like Buck is rescued by this man, and then this man becomes his master, and he treats him well. And the way he describes the absolute love and adulation that Buck has for his new master, like, really moved me. Really emotionally moved me. And, like, some of the descriptive passages, especially of, like, the area, the wild, specifically, because it's very much about this dog sort of becoming one with its surroundings. It was, yeah, incredibly potent and beautifully written. And very short as well. And I loved it so much that, like, as soon as I finished it, I started reading say it's not a sequel, but it's like a comparison novel, which is White Fang, which is the opposite. It's a wild wolf becoming a
domesticated
animal, basically. So I just started reading that as well. Always wanted to read Jack London. He's like, you know, probably he's like one of the early like super prolific American authors. You know, so yeah, finally glad to get that one off the list and start reading White Fang. But so yeah, it's all about yourself, mate. You been up to anything?
Not too much. I mean, the only thing worth noting is I did binge a TV show on Netflix recently.
What was that?
One came up, which it was the name of a story which I'd had multiple friends of mine have advised me to read this book. And it's always been on the list in some fashion or another, but I just never got round to it. And then I saw that an adaptation had been made. I know that one adaptation was already made in Chinese, but this was one that was in English. And I thought, well, I suppose that'd be easy to flick on. I'll be honest, by the end of the first episode, I was utterly hooked by the concept of that. And it was a free body problem written by Cixin Liu. And this story is an immensely interesting story about contact with aliens. Now, the story itself actually starts during the Industrial Revolution in China, which is a very strange location to start a science fiction story, but it actually all ties in together amazingly well, with multiple characters all weaved into a plot about how humanity is contacted by aliens from other worlds. But the contact isn't necessarily the expectation of what people think it would happen when aliens contact. For instance, scientists across the world start to see numbers in their vision, counting down. And then they kill themselves when the time gets to 0. And they discover that what it is that it's a warning to stop developing certain types of technology.
Oh, right. All right. Kind of like the Abyss, I suppose.
Yeah.
Aliens coming to Earth to like warn humanity.
And this is it. This is the concept that if you stop trying to create this technology, the countdown freezes.
Oh.
And they've got no clue as to what relevance this technology has to the aliens or why it'd be so important, but the aliens are essentially telling them, pack it the fuck in. And it's how this progresses. I mean, it's got a lot of very interesting science fiction concepts, which, to be honest, I haven't seen too much of in other stories. There's a little bit of high dimensional stuff. There's aspects of AI, things like that. It's a very interesting, very deep story that flicks all over the place. It's got some nice elements of comedy, and it can be downright vicious at times as well. So it's just I don't want to spoil it. This is the thing, because from the first episode, there are revelations, twists, and turns. And for a 10 episode, I believe it was 10 episode series on Netflix, it drew me in immediately, and I watched the entire thing over 2 days.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, and this isn't the end of the story. That is literally only there's clearly going to be more. So it's one that I might mention if you find yourself a couple of days, you're thinking of a show to take a look at. I'm not going to say it should be your thing, but it might be up your street.
Truth be told, mate, Haley's always looking for new series to watch. So
yeah, essentially, one thing I did intrigue me was the concept of the term "free body problem," which is it's a scientific term, wherein if you have a body that's moving in space that's being influenced by free gravitational bodies around it, there is not enough computational data or information or processing ability on the planet for us to calculate the movements of a planet through free gravitational pulls. It's just simply immeasurable, and that actually ties into being a significant plot point in the story. So, I encourage. Okay. So, what we're going to be doing today is getting a little bit into an analysis of a director and some of his works. We're going to be speaking about Wes Anderson and a couple of movies that he's made along the way. Now, with that in mind, should we take a quick break and then we'll get right back into it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll see you all in just a moment. Welcome back to the podcast, and now we're going to get into it. We want to have a bit of a discussion regarding the early life and works of Wes Anderson. Now, this is a director you're somewhat familiar with, aren't you, Gav?
So, my experience with Wes Anderson is extremely limited. I would say that he's a director I've known about for a long time because of yourself. I believe the first film that you recommended I watch by him was Fantastic Mr. Fox, and this was 15 years ago. Obviously not one of the films we're going to be talking about today, but yeah, that was my first introduction to him. And so I didn't really know what to expect, obviously. Because when you suggested this episode, that's when I went, do you know what, it's probably about time. Actually, no, tell a lie. The Life Aquatic I was aware of before as well.
Yeah.
Our dear friend Tom is a bit of a Wes Anderson guy. And he was telling me about the Life Aquatic years and years ago, but I never got around to watching it. Never got around to watching it. I like the idea of it. I like how he described it. And I've seen like bits of it, bits of his films. I know that he has like a template and a style and an aesthetic. I know that he is known for that, like being an artist, let's say, an auteur, maybe a director or auteur. But yeah, it wasn't until obviously you suggested doing an episode on Wes Anderson, and when I actually went out and watched his films. so yeah, I'm not super. I don't really know much about him. In actual fact, this episode may well be a bit of an education for me. We'll see what happens.
Well, me myself, I've been a fan of Wes Anderson for a long time. It's actually something that me and my wife like to share together, and we've watched a lot of his movies, both for the first time together, because we just both immensely enjoy them.
Would you say he's your favourite film director?
He's one of, I don't know if it's necessarily my favourite, tricky to say, but he definitely makes top 3.
Oh, okay.
As I say, he's something that me and my wife both share a love of. And when this is the thing is, with most directors, you feel the need to binge their movies, but with Wes Anderson, I've never had that urge. I like to take my time. There's still 1 or 2 Wes Anderson movies I haven't watched yet because it doesn't feel like it's the right time yet for me to watch them.
He's a director. His filmmaking style warrants consideration. I feel like they are films that require repeated views and musings over a long period of time. For different reasons, but like I'm kind of like that with David Lynch. Actually, there's still 2 films, even though I would consider David Lynch in my top 3. There's still 2 films of his that I haven't seen yet.
You're holding off on them, aren't you? They're little treasures for the future.
Yeah. One day I'll get round to it. Probably one of them. I know the other 2. One of them I know is supposedly one of his most obtuse pieces of work, and the other one is one of his most simplistic. So, I know what's coming up, but. Yeah, it's not. It is nice. Binge culture is something that I'm not sure if I'm completely down with, because I find that if you just binge something really quickly, you don't absorb it, you don't take it in, you're not giving yourself enough time to think about it. A big mistake I've made over the years, Mark, I'm not sure I've mentioned this to you before, is like if I've watched something like quite obtuse or something that's open to interpretation. So, for example, let's say Neon Genesis Evangelion, to go back to David Lynch, Twin Peaks, especially with Twin Peaks season 3. Like, I didn't do it with Evangelion, I know that for a fact, but Twin Peaks season 3 I did. The moment I finished it, I went straight online and started Googling it, and I was like, I should not have done that. I should have sat with it for a while. Yeah, because sometimes, I'm sure we'll get into, like directors like Wes Anderson is the same. Like the imagery is just as important as the dialogue that's being spoken. He's a filmmaker. So talk about Denis Villeneuve's discussion about how, as we mentioned in the Dune episode, how television has sort of taken over film, and film isn't about film anymore. It's about people walking and talking. And while Wes Anderson's films are very much talkies, let's say, because they are dramas, much of the information is communicated through visual style, isn't it? And music and score and whatnot, imagery, framing. It's like a true filmmaker. So I find with directors like this, and David Lynch as well, that these are the kind of films where they sort of communicate to you on an emotional level, and sometimes you don't quite understand how you feel about something until you've sat with it for a little while. Someone's not just told you, a character hasn't just told you the ending in the film, which is what happens in a lot of films nowadays. Instead, it's really about your emotional reaction to it, and you need to sort of sit with it for a while. And
what Wes Anderson will often just hand you an ending which you probably didn't see coming, and you do need a moment to sit back and go, that what? And it's certainly an ending to a story, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it's not necessarily the ending you expect. So it can be a little bit jarring at times. He does like to take some interesting narrative choices in his stories, but it doesn't make them any less special. It's just they are films that can be filled with surprise.
It's always through his artistic lens in the end, isn't it? It's always through his identity. He has his signature stamped all over his films, no matter how he tells the story.
Yeah. And that style is what's pretty much defined him in cinema. He's known for it, and I want to get a little bit more into that a little later on. But what I was first going to do is just go through a brief history, just give you the cliff notes of his life up until the present.
Before you go there, actually, I just wanted to ask, actually, what was the first of his films that you saw?
It would probably be Fantastic Mr. Foxman.
Oh, as well, really? Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I'm a Roald Dahl fan. I mean, I've been
Of course.
reading it, and when I saw someone had adapted a Roald Dahl story, I was like, result, yeah, nice, awesome. And I started watching it, and straight off the bat, you feel that something's, I'm not going to say something's not quite right, but something is different about that movie compared to other children's movies.
Tonally, isn't it? It's tonally.
It's not patronising or anything like that, like some children's movies can be.
You know what? Yeah, now that you've mentioned it, I'm on air. I'm going to say this. I'm going to my season 2 episode ideas, and I'm typing in Roald Dahl. That's got to happen. That's got to happen. I actually reread some Roald Dahl in the last couple of years, and it's been years. How about even like our favourite children's books? Who knows? We'll see what happens. But a Roald Dahl episode, that is definitely on the cards.
Absolutely good. We should be able to revisit some of the stuff we're going to touch upon today. So, to that end, Wes Anderson, born Wesley Wales Anderson on May 1st, 1969 in Houston, Texas. He was he's a middle child of 3 boys, and graduated from St. John's School in 1987. Now, the reason that's important is because he actually revisited the school back in 1998, where he filmed his first official movie, which was Rushmore.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Now, his actual start was making silent movies with his father's cameras. I believe it was a Super 8 is the term for that style of camera.
Yes.
And he went on to become a cinema projectionist whilst he was studying for university.
Mm-hmm.
Now, funnily enough, it's whilst he was at university that his roommate, Owen Wilson, came into his life.
Ah, right. Okay. So that's why he's in all his films.
Yeah, the two of them knew each other before he even got big.
Wow.
And, yeah, he ended up graduating with a BA with a major in philosophy, of all things. And then eventually started to dive straight into his film career. So the first movie he made was Bottle Rocket in 1996, which, funnily enough, starred Owen Wilson, and apparently he dragged his brother along, Luke, as well. And it's a story of 2 friends that dream of achieving a major heist, like a caper or something. And this movie has always received good reviews, but it did terrible in its box office. It absolutely absolutely bombed in that regard. Yeah. But it was still the start. He was still finding his feet. He followed this up 2 years later with Rushmore, which is a high school story filmed in his old high school. The story of a student who develops a crush on her elementary school teacher. Now, this is the first time he worked with Bill Murray and Jason Schwartzman. And Murray credits this movie as being the reason why he got a second act in his acting career, specifically in independent movies. Says that this brought him back. So, credit where credit's due. And the fact that Bill Murray got on board so early with Wes Anderson as well, because that's literally only his second movie.
They're literally synonymous with each other as well. So, yeah.
Next is one that we're going to be going into a little bit later on. That would be the Royal Tenenbaums, made in 2001. And this turned out to be his most successful movie to date up until the release of the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always liked Tenenbaums. When I finally got around to watching it, surprising movie. But moving on. That was followed up by 2004 by The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. And I feel that this is when Anderson started to get into his rhythm a little bit. He started to define the qualities that you become synonymous with a lot of Anderson movies. Now, I'm going to skip over the next couple of movies because he has got quite a filmography at this point, but I'm just going to make some notable mentions. Now, next one would be 2009's Fantastic Mr. Fox. The only reason I'm mentioning it is because it's the first one I watched and I fucking loved it. Mm-hmm. But funny enough, that movie barely even broke even. Like, it barely made back its budget. So,
I mean, it's a strange movie.
Yeah, exactly. The marketing wasn't strong for it when it came out anyway, because I don't think they knew how to market it. Now, following that, we got 2014 Grand Budapest Hotel, and that is one of his greatest and critical successes, and also resulted in his first nomination for an Academy Award as a director.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
However, he didn't win that year. In actual fact, he didn't win an Academy Award until the release of 2023's The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, which is a short movie that was released on Netflix. It's only about 40 minutes long, with Benedict Cumberbatch, Dev Patel, Ralph Fiennes, and Ben Kingsley. And this is another Roald Dahl story. He made a number of Wes Anderson made a number of stories for Netflix based on the book The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and Six More, which is a series of short stories that Dahl released, and this resulted in him getting the Oscar win for Best Short Movie. So, respect. I feel like he deserved it a lot sooner than that. Not saying he should be showered in adulation, but I feel that a little recognition a little earlier in his career would have been nice. But nonetheless, Wes Anderson is an established filmmaker. He's been known for a long time in the industry that specializes in, now my terminology here is going to break down a little bit, but the description I've heard of it is postmodern cinema. That he's recognized for his unique framing and storytelling, along with an ability to call on some of the most talented people in Hollywood. And it is kind of insane how it is he's managed to draw upon such a huge talent pool. It seems like people are queuing up to be in his movies. Now,
who refers to him as postmodern?
I'm not sure, but it's a terminology I saw used with him, and I'm not too familiar with terms like that.
Postmodern is a literary term originally.
Yeah.
A literary movement. For example, American Psycho. You know, there was the modernist writers movement, which was the early 20th century, and then they established the literary norms, let's say, and then the postmodernists were the ones that what's the name of the author of Crash as well? For God's sake. And he did High Rise.
Oh, well, I see what you're getting at there. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Oh, for God's sake!
Because I've watched High Rise, the one with.
I haven't actually read that. I haven't actually. J.G. Ballard. That's it. He's another one who's such as a modernist. Edgar Rice Burroughs. No, not Edgar Rice Burroughs. There's another one as well. Oh God, I didn't think. If I'd known you were going to mention this, I would have done some research.
It's only a term that's not applied to his name, but I do agree with the other more apt descriptions of absurdist and whimsical.
Yes, I'm not sure if I would have called him postmodern. Postmodern really is about a movement that subverts what is the established modern norm at the time, you know, and like the postmodernist authors were like doing lots of really, really interesting things with like narrative and like the actual medium. Have you ever heard of Naked Lunch? It was William S. Burroughs. I was right. It was William S. Burroughs. My God, I should have listened to myself. That's another postmodernist novel. Like in terms of its like narrative form, it's written really strangely. It's a very strange read. Like supposedly you can like certain pages you can sort of form together and read instead of like the individual pages, and it makes sense. There's loads of like crazy weird stuff around it. And then of course what's the director of? My God, I'm terrible with names today. Cronenberg. Cronenberg made a film of it with Peter Weller. You should watch it because it's
okay.
It's weird, but yeah, like Dave Cronenberg, I would consider like a postmodernist filmmaker for definite. Actually, like his films are fucking so weird, very weird. I'd consider Dark City like almost postmodernist in how it like deals with narrative form. Anyway, I could go on about his pages, but yeah, I'm not sure. I've not seen enough of his films. Like, this is a little bit of a spoiler to say it now, but like, for me personally, like Anderson's narrative order is traditional, but it's presented in an interesting way. Would you say you agree with that or not? How do you feel about that?
No, I will agree that he likes to layer his narrative. He doesn't.
Well, what I mean is, but the narratives are quite straightforward, though.
Yeah, they're straightforward in storytelling aspects.
Yeah. Like if you actually like layered it out, I mean, apart from the complex ensemble cast of characters, like in terms of like actual narrative arcs, it is literally just Freytag's pyramid. You know, like it's just up, down, arc, end. Like, but the way it's presented is more interesting. It's making postmodernist, though. I don't know. It's interesting. I never thought of that. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you there. It was a bit of a tangent.
That's okay. Now, one thing I've seen with a lot of Wes Anderson movies is that they do have similar themes and similar through lines for all of them. He likes to deal with stories that focus on the likes of grief, familial connections, sometimes sibling rivalry, loss of innocence, and other personal connections.
Family issues is what the thing that I picked out. Although I've only seen a few of his movies, but family tension.
Yeah, that
seems like
crops up a lot. Yeah.
Did he have like daddy issues? Did he have like parental issues when he, like, you know, as a child? Do you know?
I wouldn't be able to suppose on that one. I mean, I do sort of pick up on the sibling aspect because being a middle child, that can sometimes lend itself to shaping a person's personality.
Yeah.
And a lot of his movies are rhythmed with comedic tones, but they still suffer deep melancholic beats. And sometimes can be quite jarring at times for what is essentially a light story hitting with quite a hard note every now and again. Now, the movies themselves, he does like to utilize very specific filming styles. He's recognized for the fact that he likes to treat the scenes that he films as flat space and use camera movement to emphasize that, including pans, tilts, and zooms. And he also likes to specialize in symmetry. He loves to create frames of symmetry and sometimes discord in that symmetry to reflect emotion in the scenes. And I remember telling this to you before you watched Fantastic Mr. Fox, and you actually got a little bit annoyed with me and said, I wish you hadn't told me that. I wish I could have discovered that for myself and actually come to that conclusion myself.
Let's hope that no one is, because this podcast is going to think that.
Oh, yeah.
The truth is, like, the symmetrical shot is like, it's a hallmark of an auteur director anyway. A lot of foreign film directors, like, you know, been doing this for like over 100 years. It was, you know, even go back to Fritz Lang's Metropolis. You know, there's like, it's almost like they're replicating paintings, you know, like classical paintings that are symmetrical to emphasize meaning. And like film directors, cinematographers are using like similar techniques in how they form their shots to emphasize the meaning they want to emphasize. And like, you know, that puts Wes Anderson in that like grand lineage of, you know, you don't see Michael Bay do it, you know, like ever, truth be told. I'm going to be honest, you don't really see Chris Nolan do it. You know, there's something I like about Denis Villeneuve, you know, because especially with the use of Roger Deakins, the cinematographer, you know, is a great example of what you're talking about, that symmetrical shot. The Coens use it as well, use him a lot as well. Yeah, I do like a well thought out, you know, shot. Obviously Hitchcock as well. Hitchcock was very influential in such techniques. He was actually one of the first directors to use like the panning shot. Did you know that?
Really?
Yeah. It's the one with Jimmy Stewart when he's disabled.
Oh, Rear Window.
Rear Window. Yeah. There's a shot where like the camera like moves around. It's so like if you're a film student, you could probably write a fucking thesis on how he does it and like the angles and like the frame, how he holds the frame. But like it
gives an effective sense of scale to a scene, doesn't it? So.
Yeah. But also, like with Wes Anderson, when a shot is framed symmetrically in the way that he likes to do it, it does draw your attention to it and makes you look at the shot. I think almost like it draws you out of that suspension of disbelief of watching a movie. You're like, I'm not watching a movie, I'm watching something that's gonna say something.
Yeah, it feels like a production, like watching theatre.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I was we were talking about that on what podcast is it? Have you been watching? Oh God, now it's almost like we're having a chat now down the pub. Why not? Why not? They were talking about that on the Mr. Sunday Movies. Have you seen the newest episode with King Kong?
Mm-hmm. No, not the King Kong one. No.
Oh right, yeah. And like, it's actually a really interesting thing to talk about. Actually, because I recently watched Dracula, and when you watch how like a lot of the Bela Lugosi Dracula, how a lot of these films are staged, they are literally staged like theatre. And like a lot of these like lower level, let's say, film directors were not really thinking about how they frame the shot. They were just merely filming the shot, you know. So,
what else? I mean, there were a couple of other keynotes that I wanted to hit, such as the fact that he likes to use limited color palettes in his settings.
Yes.
and often just to reflect emotion and tone for different parts of movies. He does that effectively well. And he's also got an increased use in miniatures and stop motion ever since, I think it was Life Aquatic is when he really dived into it, and that resulted in him making a couple of of stop motion animations,
Yes, of
such
course.
as Fantastic Mr. Fox and The Isle of Dogs,
Mhm.
two especially good movies.
Mhm.
And also, but for the most part, he also likes to draw a soundtrack from the likes of the 60s and the 70s. So he's utilised the likes of David Bowie, the Kinks, Beach Boys, and Hank Williams in his movies in the past, and it does give them a little bit of it. Not that it dates them to those eras. This is the strange thing about his movies.
It's timeless music.
Yeah, that a lot of these movies they never say the year that they're living in, and to be honest, you'd be hard pressed to guess what year they're in. I mean, the next movie we're going to talk about, Tenenbaums. I couldn't tell you what year that took place in because it doesn't allow itself to be dated.
It's kind of timeless, isn't it? It's kind of timeless. We'll talk about it when we talk about the film. Yeah.
So now, what I wanted to do is I did want to draw quick attention to a quote that I read about from an interview with Bryan Cranston, who worked with Wes Anderson.
Well, what film was this?
I believe it was with the release of Asteroid City.
Oh, right. Okay.
And he just wanted to describe the kind of the vibe that's on set when you're working with Wes Anderson.
Okay.
And I don't know, there's something about this quote actually gave me a good impression of what sort of film director and filmmaker he is. So, Cranston said, but it's also what surrounds where all the actors stay in the same hotel. We have dinner at one table every single night with Wes and all guests. It's like an actor camp. On a Wes Anderson film, there are no trailers, no dressing rooms. There's no hierarchy, no call sheet. You are just ready to go at 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning in your wardrobe. You hop in his golf cart with him or on a van and you go to the set. You hang out with everyone so you never know if you're going to be called into a scene. He's such a kind and generous spirit, and also in his personal life. Everyone makes the same amount of money. You just show up and off you go. Sometimes you might just be a small supporting role in the scene. Then in others, you'll be the lead in a movie. And I don't know why I like that. I like the idea he builds a camaraderie between his stars. He treats them all equal, that they are all just components to this movie. And he wants
the fact that Cranston is the man speaking up for him as well. Cranston himself is a proprietor of fair treatment, isn't he, on film sets and TV sets? You know, with Malcolm in the Middle. What was it he did, Mark? What was that story?
Oh, he was what he did is he got himself a license to be in the Songwriters Guild of America, so that if you're in a cinematic movie or on television or anything, if you can compose any music, you get rights and royalties to it. And what he used to do is, whilst he was on screen, he'd hum songs, just totally off the top of his head, totally original compositions that he'd then register. And as a result, he had to be paid rights, which he then utilised that money to pay towards getting treats and toys for the kids that turned up on Malcolm in the Middle. Didn't make any profit himself. All that money just went back towards the kids. It was just a little thing that he did on the side because he thought it'd be nice. That guy is... Yeah, everything I hear about that guy, I just like him.
Yeah. Fei Long in Street Fighter, the animated movie as well. I mean, that doesn't get even more badass than that, does it?
Really?
Yeah, it's Fei Long. Yeah.
That is news to me, man.
I'd love to know whether or not he was doing the noises that he does. But yeah,
I love Cranston, but if I thought of a Bruce Lee clone, he's not the first person that comes to mind.
He's actually appearing quite. How do you say? He did his time. Let's say he plays a bit part in a Babylon 5 episode. He was like in lots and lots of TV. You know, just like
he pops up in a random X-Files episode at one point. That tripped
me out. That's right. Paying his dues, as they say.
Yeah,
he's
been there for a long time. But he just yeah. So with that in mind, what we're going to be doing today is dipping into 3 specific movies from Wes Anderson. Arbitrary choices, but these are all solid movies for different reasons. We're going to be looking into the Royal Tenenbaums, The Aquatic Life with Steve Zissou, The Life Aquatic even with Steve Zissou, and The Grand Budapest Hotel. So if you're ready, Gav, shall we take a quick break and get straight to the first movie?
Looking forward to it.
Okay, well, on that note, we'll be right back. Welcome back, and now we're going to get into the first of the movies we're going to visit today, and that'd be the Royal Tenenbaums. Now, have you seen? Did you say you've watched this recently?
Yes, I watched it a couple of weeks. I watched it for the first time about 3 weeks ago, and I've done some like revisits and watched a few retrospectives and read some reviews like in the last couple of days.
I see.
Yes.
So, yeah, this movie released in 2001 on a budget of 21 million, made back 71.4 million at box office, and that proved it as one of his first major successes when it comes to Wes Anderson. Now, this movie, I do especially like this movie, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a quick recap, just go through the plot and everything, but first I want to visit the cast. And what a cast, man.
Yes, this is, an incredible cast.
I mean, straight from the top, you've got Royal Tenenbaum played by Gene Hackman, Ethelene Tenenbaum played by Angelica Houston, Chaz Tenenbaum played by Ben Stiller, Margot Tenenbaum played by Gwyneth Paltrow, and Richie Tenenbaum played by Luke Wilson, Eli Cash played by Owen Wilson, Raleigh St. Clair played by Bill Murray, Henry Sherman played by Danny Glover, and the narrator is Alec Baldwin. Now that is a force of actors. That is a significant force from all different types of movies as well. They're some of those you think would be predominantly comedy based, some are more dramatic, some you would not expect to see on the screen together. And
I just say, like, I had no idea that Luke Wilson and Owen Wilson were brothers until like the last couple of weeks. And I watched this movie. I had no idea. You can see it now.
When you see them, especially when they're acting opposite each other, they've got an interesting familiarity. So I will say, Bottle Rocket is one of those few Wes Andersons I haven't watched yet, and I'll put it off to another day because me and Becca want to check that out at some point. Now, getting into Tenenbaums. The story starts with a narrative style which, from what I understand, was utilising a writer called Salinger. In terms of
J.D. Salinger.
Yes. Their narrative style of reading a book to recount the story.
Yeah.
And this is something you'll see a lot in Wes Anderson stories, is he likes to layer his narrative. He never likes to just show you the story. He likes to place the story within a framing device of telling the story to you.
It's interesting. Salinger's most famous novel is The Catcher in the Rye, which is often regarded to be like one of the great American novels. It is a great coming of age story, and it is like required reading in a lot of schools. Have you ever read it?
I have not, no.
It's very good. It is very good. It's very, very good. Yeah, interesting.
Now, the start of the movie introduces us to the three Tenenbaum children. Chaz, Margot, and Richie, all of which are clearly gifted children for different reasons. So Chaz specialises in the likes of maths and business, whilst Margot is more of a prospective playwright. She's also adopted, which her father takes every opportunity to remind anyone that they meet. And Richie, who is a tennis prodigy and also potentially a questionable artist. Now, the story starts with Royal sitting his three children down and saying he's going to be separating from Ethelene. He doesn't understand why they're breaking up. He just knows that he has to leave. It's also during this short period at the beginning that you get introduced to Eli, who is a neighbour and the best friend of Richie. We then skip 22 years later to what I assume is present day. I use that term loosely because who knows what year this takes place in, but to the present day of the current narrative. And it starts with Royal now being booted out of the hotel that he's been staying in all this time for failure to pay his bills. During that time, all three of the children have suffered. Now, Richie suffered a public sports breakdown and now spends his life travelling on a ship, sending random messages back to his friend Eli. Chaz has become overprotective and paranoid due to the death of his wife a year earlier and being left with two children that he is petrified of failing in some fashion, along with the family dog Buckley. And Margot is married now to Raleigh St. Clair, a neurologist who is currently studying a young boy called Dudley due to his neurodivergence.
Wait, that's played by Bill Murray, isn't it?
That's correct, yes. And Gwyneth Paltrow and Bill Murray, that is a strange pairing on screen. The way in which they play it as well is just, I think they kind of play up the awkwardness of their own marriage so well that they clearly, both of them to a degree, know we're not really meant to be together, but nonetheless. Okay, so in this time, the actual events get triggered by Ethelene getting a proposal from Henry, that's Danny Glover's character. At this point, Royal starts to make moves to try and get back into his family home and claims he has stomach cancer. Now, due to assorted events, it draws the family back together and everyone moves back to the family home. Now, during this time, Royal actually has the opportunity to connect with his grandsons, Ari and Uzi, and takes them out. Now, most grandfathers would get to know their kids, but he decides to take them to dogfights and shoplifting. Chaz understandably flips out a little over this. And in the meantime, Eli tells Margot that Richie has been contacting him and sending him letters that declare his romantic love for Margot, despite the fact Eli at this point is actually continuing an ongoing affair with her. Now, this starts to break down because the two of them, it is more happenstance. I think they even admit that the only reason they're together is because of the commonality of Richie.
Yes.
Now, during this time, Riley starts to suspect that Margot is having the said affair, and with Richie hires a PI to investigate the affair. Whilst this is all taking place, Henry discovers that the cancer that Royal is claiming to have is in actual fact fake, and as a result, gets Royal kicked out of the house after announcing it to the family. Now, I will be honest, this is one of the best scenes where Pagoda, who is Royal's servant, when the two of them have been kicked out of the house, and Pagoda, up until this point, the only piece of information you've been told about Pagoda is that he once saved Royal from after Royal was stabbed in the stomach. At which point he confirms that, well, he was actually the guy that stabbed me in the stomach in the first place, but nonetheless. At this point, Pagoda calmly opens up her penknife and stabs him in the stomach again. Then gets him in a taxi and the both of them head to a local YMCA. Now, Richie and Raleigh sit and they learn from the PI that Margot has had an ongoing life of promiscuous activities. She is married multiple times. She's a very secretive person. I mean, her family don't realize that she smokes. She disappeared for a short period of time in her teens, I believe. And
the smoking is like the smoking. I remember is a massive part of her character, isn't it? Where she's like, I remember her sitting in that toilet, just chain smoking like a machine.
And they have a story part aspect where she returns back after running away from home for a short period of time, missing part of one of her fingers. An aspect that's never explained or alluded to or given any sort of sense. It is just an element of her personality that she is a very secretive character. She doesn't like to share too much. Now, this revelation that Margot is in actual fact having an ongoing affair with his best friend breaks Richie a little. At which point he goes home, he calmly shaves, and looks into the mirror. And after shaving his hair and his face, during which up to this point he's had long hair, he's had a beard, he's had sunglasses, he strips it all back. He stares into the mirror and says, "I'm going to kill myself."
It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Like this, like character arc, because he's like his archetype is like the failed sportsman, isn't it? At that point, and he's like got the long hair and the beard, and he wears like the glasses, doesn't he, for a lot of the film, and his hair is unkempt, and it's like, and he like cleans himself up to kill himself.
It's almost like he wants to present himself better.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I know, like in like Japanese historical history, you know, they take their shoes off or whatever to commit seppuku, you know. But I don't know. I always thought this was like an interesting,
almost like he's removing his armor or something. So
I don't. Yeah. It's interesting. I don't really fully understand what it's supposed to mean in the narrative, but maybe he's, I don't know, like in the grand scheme of the story, his like suicide attempt is kind of like a rebirth, really.
Yeah.
You know, for him and for Margot, really, isn't it? But maybe that's what it symbolizes. Maybe the fact that he's has no hair, you know, because he shaves his head, doesn't he, as well?
Yeah.
Is like symbolic of the fact that he's like starting a new life after trying to end it. Maybe.
Now, I will be honest, this is quite a little bit of a harrowing scene, to be honest, where all you can see is just the wrists with the blood pouring down them. And then the next shot is him just lying on the floor with Dudley, the case study, silently screaming. Then it immediately leaps into an almost absurdist point of view of Bill Murray running through the hospital with the bed in front of him, surrounded by the doctors. It's because that Wes Anderson style of going to that cemetery almost jolts you out of how dark this scene is and brings it back to a comical aspect. It's very strange. Also leads to one of the funniest conversations in the movie for me, which I feel bad for laughing about it, but it just cracks me up the way in which it's delivered. And that's when his family's around his bed after he wakes up, and they start questioning him over what was that all about. And I'm just going to read the quote for you, and it's just Chaz says, "Why'd you try to kill yourself?" And Richie says, I wrote a suicide note. And Chaz says, you did? So, yeah, right after I regained consciousness. And can we read it? So, no. So, can you paraphrase it for us? So he goes, I don't think so. Is it dark? He goes, of course it's dark. It's a suicide note. And I don't know why I feel bad almost for laughing about it, but it is the way in which they talk to each other in such a matter-of-fact fashion. And that is something you get a lot in Wes Anderson movies, that people do. They don't necessarily talk naturally. They don't talk the way you expect people to normally speak. They're much more succinct and to the point and very matter-of-fact in their delivery. It's just he has a strange delivery style that I really like. It's hard to explain.
There's a dry quirkiness to it.
There's very little emotion at times.
Yeah. It's strange. I find this film to be quite dry overall, really. But at the same time, there is and the quirky comedy is really light. I'm not sure if I laughed out loud once through the whole film, but I was like mildly amused by it, I would say. Overall, it's weird.
Yeah,
that sort of goes into my overall thoughts of the film, though. So continue with the synopsis.
Okay, so eventually Richie escapes the hospital and goes to find Margot, who's hiding in a tent that he has set up in one of the studios in the house, and confesses his feelings to her, and she reciprocates, and the two of them share a kiss. Just want to remind you, she is adopted at that point, so whilst it's sibling, it isn't technically blood sibling, a point he actually emphasizes to his father a little later.
It's quite potent how he shows his scars to her.
Yeah.
He just opens his arms and shows them to her. I watched a quite interesting YouTube documentary today about this sequence and how he shoots them through separate angles to show their separation, and then after he shows her his scars, that's when he sits with her and they're shot together. And I think that
he's exposing himself fully, showing full vulnerability.
Absolutely, yes. This is it. The act of suicide is the act of suicide. But I at the time I remember thinking this as well, that when he shows the scars on his forearms, and they are quite horrific. To be fair, he takes the plasters off, doesn't he? And it's like he is revealing himself to her, completely naked in front of her. It was actually quite a good scene, quite a beautiful scene, actually. I thought it was very well done.
Yeah. And this does give Richie a bit of a new lease on life, so to speak.
His rebirth, isn't it?
Yeah, and he goes and talks to his father, and I think he helps his father a lot as well in Royal. At which point, the sequence of events leads to Royal agreeing to a divorce to Etheline, and giving her the opportunity to marry Henry. Mm-hmm. Now, Richie also approaches Eli and offers to help him get back on his feet, because Eli is a prolific drug user, and helps him to encourages him to go to rehab, which Eli initially seems quite favourable towards until he does a runner. But he doesn't disappear from the story for long. He actually comes back in spectacular fashion. During the events of Henry and Etheline's wedding, Eli was high on mescaline, drives a car, and he's wearing full face paint at this point. It is quite a surreal moment.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Drives towards the house, out of his box, and almost hits Ari and Uzi, the sons of Chaz, who were saved at the last second by Royal. But unfortunately, the family dog Buckley is killed in that moment.
Very sad.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
It is. It's comic. You don't want to laugh about the sequence which involves the death of a dog, but it's so horrible. It's so sad that it kind of snakes its way around to funny again. It's hard to explain. You don't want to laugh about it, but at the same time, the sequence of events around it are just so absurd. The resulting crash ends up launching him through the window into the wedding, and Chaz loses his mind a little. This is kind of the culmination of everything he's been trying to do to keep his son safe, and even then he can't even save them from a friend of the family, and he snaps and ends up charging after Eli throughout the house, which eventually ends with them leaping over a wall into a next-door neighbour's garden, both hitting the ground and realising that both in their own separate ways need help. Now, at this point, the story starts to wrap up. Now, it does have one scene here which... This scene breaks me a little bit. I'm going to be absolutely honest. There's a panning shot where every single person is visited in one scene outside the front of the house after the fire engines turned up, and all the different characters are stood in different places just talking. And it pans down to the fact that Royal has purchased the Dalmatian of the fire engine, and he walks up to Chaz and says, "Got you a new dog," which some might see as a little bit cold, seeing as Buckley is literally underneath the car that's in the background. But nonetheless, Chaz views it favourably because his dad's just saved the lives of his kids.
Of course.
Asks the dog's name, goes, "Oh, his name's Sparkplug." And the two of them crouch down, start stroking the dog. And it's the first moment when Chaz finally cracks a little and opens up to his father for the first time in a long time. And he looks up at him and goes, "I've had a rough year, Dad."
Mm-hmm.
And his dad just says, "I know, Chazzy." Oh my fucking God, man. That scene makes me well up. I don't know what it is about it. There's something about everything that's come before. That scene hits me so hard. And I don't really understand why.
Ben Stiller's character, Chaz, is dealing with grief, isn't he? And I think out of all of the characters, he's the one who's most resistant to Royal Tenenbaums, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's the most aggressive towards him.
He is outward hostile from the first note.
Yeah.
So
there's a few reasons why, as you say, like, you know, there's a sense of overprotectiveness of his children, but it's coincidental, is it not, that his children look exactly like him? And I think it's really metaphorical of him being protective of himself. You know, it's like allegorically, it all sort of works together. That overprotective nature of his children is also of his own feelings, and it takes that like sequence of events for, I guess, because in the end we all have barriers, don't we? We all have defenses, let's say, whether it be against strangers, you know, or new relationships, new loves, new boyfriends, new girlfriends, whatever. You know, there's always like a test, isn't there, that people have to pass in order for us to reveal our frailty, just like you know, Richie does with Margot earlier on in the film.
Yeah,
and that's pretty much that moment, isn't it? You know, Chaz exposes his fragility, his humanity to his father.
Yeah,
it is a good scene. It is a very good scene.
Now at this point, the story does start to wrap up, and we've got Etheline and Henry getting married 48 hours later. Eli goes back into rehab. And Margot ends up releasing a new play that draws upon a lot of her experiences dealing with her own family issues. Richie ends up teaching junior tennis, going back to something that he actually finds that he enjoys immensely. And one scene which actually does make my heart sing a little is Chaz. When you see Arian Uzi on the back of that garbage truck with Gene Hackman, with Royal, and then you realise Chaz is on the back with them as well. Just the smile on his face. That little thing, I don't know why, that really...
He's letting go, isn't he?
Yeah.
His like obsessive, like protective nature and joining in on the fun.
Yeah, that really, I really like that.
It's like he's like indulging in his inner child, isn't he? That's what it is, isn't it? You know.
It is. It's like he hasn't allowed himself to feel for a long time, and he uses the excuse of protecting his children as a reason, and he's almost pushing them away for his own actions. He doesn't realise.
In that regard, yeah, exactly. In that regard, yeah. I mean, that is like the question one I'm sure all parents must ask about, whether, you know, how much is too much in the regarding of the protection of their children. You know, children have to experience life to a degree, but then if you stop them from experiencing anything, what will you gain? But that can be applied to ourselves as well. You know.
Yeah.
You refuse to experience anything for fear of being hurt, or do you have a go and acquire life experience?
Now, the film sums up with the actual death of Royal, which is only witnessed by Chaz, who's with him at the end in the back of the ambulance as he suffers a massive heart attack, and resolves with them at the graveside, all stood around, before finally the movie draws to a close with them all leaving the royal family plot. Yeah, this it's strange on multiple levels, but I do love this movie, man. It's everything about it is just so strange. I mean, I remember the first time I watched it, it was just... I mean, I'd got an idea of what Anderson was about by that point, but still, this is...
It's like the proto Wes Anderson movie, isn't it?
It is. You can see him stretching his legs and starting to establish what he wants to make in a movie.
Mhm.
That he loves the multiple characters. He loves weaving them in and out of each other, and he loves the building a family. That there's no, I mean, in terms of a protagonist in this story, I think at first you're meant to believe that it's Royal, but to be honest, I mean, you start to wonder towards the end if it is the children themselves. All three of them are the protagonists, in some fashion or another.
I'm going to be honest. I think it's Royal.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason why I think it's Royal is there's a few reasons why. Number one, this is an ensemble cast, and there are too many characters in it. It's a big criticism I have of this movie. Like, my biggest problem with this movie is that, like, while yes, it is like the core of this movie is about a father reconnecting with his family and with his children, isn't it, in various ways and whatnot. That to me is what the underpinning notion of this movie is, why it exists, you know.
Yeah.
And the lengths of which he goes to do it. In the end, like, he lies at first, doesn't he, to try and get in, but then Royal learns that just through acts of kindness he is able to reconnect with his children, which is
Oh, he has that line where I think he turns around and says, "What's it? The last 6 days have been the happiest 6 days of my entire life."
Exactly.
As he said that statement, he realised it to be true. It's like, at that point, he was lying until we realised that's not a lie.
Yeah, exactly. But because there are so many characters, and for me personally, the kids, well, not just the kids, also Owen Wilson's character, they're a bit like cartoon characters. They're a bit one note. They're a bit like caricatures, in my opinion, and they don't really have much to them apart from their single emotional turmoil that they have to deal with in the film. They don't really have many layers, as far as I'm concerned. But Royale does, and Gene Hackman has, you know, he's obviously the oldest actor on the set, really, and he just has so much range and commands the screen with a believable presence. You know, he is a believable father figure. He's always played like generals, hasn't he, and military men. He's always played a leader of men, hasn't he? He's always commanded the screen, which makes him effective in this role. It's almost like he is carrying the movie, to be honest with you, because the rest of the film is quite mad. Really.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that the way he goes about in getting what he wants is quite devious, there is a sympathetic plight within there that you sort of, you know, that you watch, and you watch, as we just mentioned, you watch this man sort of learn to just be himself, to be part of his family, you know. And I find it quite a multi-layered performance, you know, because he has to, like, pretend to be someone else, and he has to lie all the way through the movie, and he also has to play someone who is learning to be truthful as well. Remind me, what's the reason why him and Eveline are divorced originally? Didn't he cheat on her? Is that right?
I believe there's allusions to adultery, but I don't think it's.
That's right. It's vague, isn't it? But the thing is that for my money, because he's a liar through the film, that implies that it was him, and she's angry with him all the way through the film, and it kind of implies that it was him. I can't remember that. I could be wrong to say, but anyway, what I'm trying to say is that the reason why I think he is the protagonist is because it's his arc overall that is the most profoundly affecting, and it's his characterization that causes the change in the other characters. He's the one that affects everyone, and he carries the weight of the movie personally for not the heavy lifting that he's done because of Gene Hackman's, you know, presence on screen. It's almost like he wrote the part for him, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I have heard sort of like interpretations that state that the title of the movie, The Royal Tenenbaums, that it's actually an allusion to the fact that all the characters in it are reflections of him in some fashion or another.
Exactly, his flaws. Exactly. Because, well, I mean, the most obvious one is Ben Stiller's character, who is, Chaz, who is, neurotic and overprotective because he's trying to protect himself. And at the same time, Royal Tenenbaum himself is dishonest. Because he doesn't know how to be honest, because he doesn't know how to be truthful. And in the end, you know, I mean, it's cliched as fuck, but like the love between a son and a father, a mother and a daughter, is as simple as it being there. You know, it's true. It's the truth. You know, family love is real. It's the truth. You know, it doesn't get any more real than that. And I think that's what he has to learn. And again, it's like, you know, he lies his way and cheats his way through the movie to get what he wants because he can't allow himself to do that. It's just in the same way that, you know, Chaz is so protective of himself. I mean, what about Richie? I mean, he has to like try to kill himself, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think it's because
You
he
know.
is the quietest of the three. He's unable to.
Maybe is it like a plight for attention? I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
It's quite hard to say.
I mean, you discover the reason for his sports meltdown at the beginning of the story. You actually discover later is it's in actual fact the day after Margot's wedding to Raleigh St. Clair.
Of course.
And the two of them are sat in the front row of the game, and he is just having the worst game of tennis that anyone has ever witnessed, and no one seems to understand what's wrong with him. And it is such an outward sort of like cry for attention that none of his family seem to understand. No. That you do feel immensely sorry for him.
Communication, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's one thing that's probably like the biggest flaw in all of these characters is communication. None of them can say what they mean. None of them communicate with each other properly.
Despite the fact they speak so matter of fact, you're right.
Yeah, ironically, maybe that's the the point of it. You know, so speaking though, we should probably give a little bit of credit here to Gwyneth Paltrow's Margot. That is like an iconic character. You know, something like.
And talk about a character that you feel like you're not even getting half of the story, if that. Like, she alludes to so much going on in her past and her history that they just touch upon, but they never really address. And it leaves you thinking, oh, what is this character story? Because she doesn't want you to know what her history is. I mean, you get the snapshots from the PI of a life that she's lived, but it's literally that. It's literally snapshots of an entire life that's been lived aside from her family, because she felt driven away by the constant reminders that she was adopted.
Stylistically, though, like she is as interesting to look at as the rest of the film. Mm-hmm. You know, there's something like she looks like a beauty from the 60s. You were talking about like time period earlier on to talk about like the production design of this movie, like the muted pastel tones of the color, the muted pastel color scheme. And like how like every room is like cluttered, isn't it? You know, like there's a visual story just in like the items that are in the room. It kind of makes me feel like it's set in the 60s or the 70s, but more so being a child of the 80s, 90s really, born in the 80s. The 60s and the 70s, I suppose, if you ask me about them, are like an era that I don't know. I only know the 60s and 70s through film, television, photos of my parents. And this film looks like a window into an era that I don't know, but kind of want to know, if you know what I mean. You know, it's like for me, the strongest aspect of this film is the production design. It just looks the absolute bollocks. I'd love to live in this world. Personally, you know, with the colours and all, you know.
So, as this movie is, I mean, I say you criticise it for its cast, but I think the cast is one of the strong aspects of this.
I'm not criticising it for the cast.
Yeah.
I'm saying that like
the cast.
Yeah, that's what happens with ensemble casts. It's just the way it works. Is that like when you have too many characters, the characters are not as layered. It's just a fact of like.
They are archetypes by the end of it, aren't they? Essentially, they are.
Well, you know, they, as you say, that analysis of the fact that each of the children is like a reflection of like the neuroses of the dad, kind of lends itself to my belief that they are caricatures. But you know, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. You know, I wouldn't say it makes it a bad film. It just meant that like they are like, I don't know. To me, they never really felt like fleshed out characters. Yes, they all have their like little bits of history, but I don't know. I think what it comes down to, Mark, right, actually, to put a pin into what my critique of this film is that, like, the general lightness of the movie is an issue for me. Because while it is a film about heavy themes, I'm not necessarily saying that I need my films to hit me over the head with a hammer. This
ain't Godzilla -1, where you've got sort of like 5 minutes lingering silence of a character deep in grief in a quiet room.
Absolutely, but although that is my preference, to be fair. But you know, so this is purely subjective. This is absolutely a subjective opinion, and like Well, I don't necessarily need to be hit over the head for drama. I like my dramatic beats to hit as well, if you know what I mean. And like the lightness and quirkiness of the film just kind of just distances me from the film a little bit and the characters that I struggle to get invested in it in such a way as, say, like Godzilla -1. It's weird. This is not a criticism of you, but I wonder how you feel about this statement I'm about to make. I want to know what you think.
Okay.
Right? For me, this is a film about heavy themes for people who don't like films about heavy themes. How do you feel about that?
I can appreciate where you're coming from a statement like that. It doesn't allow itself to focus.
Maybe or maybe I should rephrase that. Maybe I should say it's a film about heavy themes for people who don't like heavy themes. Heavy, if that make I don't know, because like I said, they're there, but overall there's a tonal dissonance between the actual feeling that the movie provides in its tone and the actual emotions it's kind of like presenting. It's presenting stories about suicide, about grief, about family problems, real human stories, really. But it doesn't present them in a dramatically...
It doesn't allow you to feel the emotion of it too much.
Yeah, not really, no, not really. How do you feel about that statement? What do you think? Do you think that's about right? Would you say personally?
No, I think you're on point with that. It is. It's the fact of the matter is that that's one thing about Wes Anderson in general is whilst he will allude to darker tones, he doesn't want necessarily the emotion of those too much. He lets them hang for a moment, but then he loves to bring in a bit more levity. And as I said, with the sequence for the suicide that leads then to the almost comedic sequence of the way people are running through hospital corridors. And yeah, he doesn't want the movie to sit there for too long in the dark. I think it's because of that whimsical nature that he doesn't want it to sit in a dark place.
There needs to be like conflict in the grand scheme of things, isn't there, in a film? Or in a story. And like as you say, like the conflict isn't the emphasis. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Well, the thing is, the conflict is the emphasis, but it isn't so much about the actions. It's about the connections.
Well, tone. It's all about tone, really, is what I'm saying. Like what some of these characters go through is just as emotionally intense as what the main character from Godzilla -1 goes through. Frankly, this is like hard stuff. Like Ben Stiller's character specifically, he loses his wife and he's got 2 children and he just goes crazy trying, what I mean? Literally, you could write a thesis on how he feels, really. Thesis, but you could write a few paragraphs at least. And like that is like quite traumatic stuff, but the presentation of it doesn't really hit with me. No. I don't know. It's hard to say. Does he want me to interpret? Does Wes Anderson want me to interpret these feelings more than he shows them? More, show don't tell. Is he trying to show not tell more? But again, it's atonality, the tonal dissonance created because of the lightness of it. It's strange. It's so strange. Sorry, I was sort of like mincing my words here a little bit. It's very strange.
Absolutely fine. I mean, he always has been a filmmaker that chooses narratively in like surprising choices in the tones of his movies.
He's polarizing, he's very polarizing.
There are some people that can't take him seriously. They just don't like his vibe.
I can see why. I can see why. I was reading online quite a fair bit about what people think, and there's some people that like just say I don't see what all the fuss is about, and I'm like, well, I don't know.
They just think to make silly stories, and that's it.
I can see that there is something there, but like I said, I mean, like you can't. In my opinion, you can't watch his films and go, "This is crap." You could, without saying this is very well made and thought through.
There's clearly a lot of thought put into this. I mean, the choices he makes to shift past the darker tones and keep it light are intentional choices he makes to his narrative. This isn't something that's happened by accident or happened through ignorance. It's a choice, clearly, in the filmmaking process.
I'll tell you something, actually. This is another subjective point of view I have. I really struggle with the abundance of licensed music. I really struggle with it.
Yeah?
Yeah. Like, I would prefer it if there was an actual movie score It's just, I don't know. I think that is something that, especially considering the era that a lot of the music's from, there's a lot of like the Beatles, Bowie, Van Morrison, the Stones. I guess if you're into that kind of music, it will put you in a time and place. And it does put me in a time and place when I listen to it. So I guess maybe that's what makes me feel like it's from an era I can't.
I think it is meant to appeal, like at least for him, that probably reminds him of his childhood.
Yes.
And I think that's probably why he put it into the movie himself.
Yes, it does. It does set up a certain tone and feel. But again, it adds to the lightness. It adds to the tonal dissonance of the movie, the disconnect between the tone that the movie is generally creating and the actual narrative beats it's trying to hit. There's a massive disconnect between the two that just sort of like really, really hits. And the warm colours. He uses colours in quite interesting ways, though, to be fair. He uses blue to show like sadness, especially with Luke Wilson's character, Richie.
In that sequence where he's looking at himself in the mirror.
Yeah. It's very blue, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's strange. It's very, very strange. It's very, very strange. I'm kind of like very conflicted about this movie, actually.
I love the surreal tones as well, such as the way in which the cast introduced themselves. At the beginning of the movie, there is literally a cast rundown with all the characters looking at the camera.
Do you know what that reminds me of? That sort of like gives me the impression of like a sitcom, a television show sitcom. But it's world building, isn't it?
It is, and it just shows them all doing slightly different things in their world that emphasise their character.
That's something that I can credit this film for sure, is that he doesn't like... there is a lot of showing and not telling, and it really annoys me when films sit there and tell me stuff about characters. Oh, I'm really, you know what, I was a good tennis player back in my day, but instead we get to see it, we see it. And it's much more, inferring these moments with our own interpretations makes it more, emotionally resonant than just having a character say it to us, and that's something I definitely credit him. And like I said, well, in those intro sequences where it shows all the characters and the names, you just get like a very, very quick hit on this characterization that sets you up to follow them through the film. Because you need to know who these characters are because there's so bloody many of them, It's a lot. Danny Glover's in this goddamn film, man.
He barely gets like 10 minutes to shine.
He's so important. He's so important to the story,
But there was one tone that I actually picked up on. I found it later through analysis of the movie. Something was pointed out to me that I didn't see or didn't pick up on when I first watched them.
What's that?
It's the fact that all of the children, as adults, still dress in the exact same clothes they wore as kids.
Yes, I think that might have had something to do with me feeling like they're cartoon characters, to be honest.
It was meant to be a highlighter of the term arrested development.
Yes, which it's like coincides with like the breakup of the family, I feel.
Yeah, that they almost stalled in their development.
Yeah. I feel like, definitely an important theme in this story is like the effects of divorce on the children, because it is stated quite literally that they're all massive successes, and then suddenly they all fall foul after the divorce, and that is very clearly saying that divorce can and will and has had like massive derogatory effects on the children, no matter the age. So
So this is a movie that I will always encourage people to check it out. It may not be for everybody, but I feel it's an important movie. It's one of those movies that's been recognised. I believe it's recognised by Congress. It's like one of those movies. I know they keep a lot in the Congress library, but this is one of those ones that they made a big deal about putting in the Congress library. So, do you have anything else you want to add to that, man?
No, I think actually, I feel like I've pretty much said everything I need to say about this movie. It's yeah. Good, we're there.
Okay, so what we'll do, I think we're going to draw this part to a close then, and we'll be moving on next to The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. I look forward to getting into that one with you as well, man.
Yep, looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, on that note, we will be right back. And welcome back to the podcast. So, Gav, with that in mind, and we've got Tenenbaums now in the rearview mirror, we're going to be moving on to the next of the Wes Anderson movies that we wanted to review.
The next one he made, isn't it?
I believe so. Yes, it was in the timeline.
Yeah.
Now, I feel in this one he starts to lean in more into his style, and that would be the Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. Now, firstly, going to follow a similar format as before. We're going to go through the cast, and then we're just going to hit the points of the plot. Front and center, we've got Bill Murray here playing Captain Steve Zissou.
Yeah, he's fresh off what do you call it? I should have fucking researched that. This is a film I really, really like. Imagine not remembering the name of one of your favourite films. Not one of your favourite films, but a film that you really, really like. What was the film we did before this? Lost in Translation.
That's a nice with Richard Johansson, yeah.
Fresh off that back of that film.
Excellent movie, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
And supported by the likes of, you've got Owen Wilson playing Ned Plimpton, Kate Blanchett playing Jane Winslet Richardson, Angelica Houston as Eleanor Zissou, Willem Dafoe, and let's just take a moment, Willem Dafoe, man. That's Klaus Daimler.
Kind of not so dark in this movie. Kind of like quite light and quite funny, I have to say.
It's a side of him I haven't seen before.
He's quite good.
Yeah, I want to get into that in a little bit. Don't you worry. We've got the always awesome Jeff Goldblum as Alistair Hennessy, and Michael Gambon as Osiri Dracules.
Yes.
Now, I'm just going to rattle through this plot quickly just to get us all up to speed, if that'd be okay.
Yeah.
So we starts with Steve Zissou working on a documentary. He works on a naval ship and he's currently cataloguing the ocean. He likes to release documentaries, and it's during this documentary that we find that his partner, Esteban, has been devoured by the jaguar shark. Now, Zissou swears to document the shark for his next documentary and also swears revenge. Now, returns to his ship, the Belafonte, along with a crew which consists of his standard crew, a number of interns, and a man who enjoys playing David Bowie songs in Portuguese on his guitar.
I actually really like this guy.
I know.
Yeah. Like I mentioned like how his Anderson's use of like pop music I find quite jarring when it's overdone. But like having someone actually sat in the film playing it, sometimes maybe even not necessarily part of the story itself, I thought was actually really cool. And it was a nice touch. I really, really liked it.
And it's a way of almost removing the lyrics, so all you got is the melody and the emotion.
Yeah. I like that. I liked that a lot.
So, the fact of the matter is, this is the first documentary they're going to be releasing in 9 years, so they are somewhat nervous. And at this point, we have Ned join the crew. Now, Ned believes Zissou is his father. Now, normally an airline pilot, his mother recently died, and this pushed him to actually reach out to his father and actually reconnect, or connect in the first place, things they've never met in actual fact. So he takes his leave and asks to join the crew. Now, he offers his inheritance to fund the expedition because they're low on funds.
If I remember correctly, I think you've forgotten.
Yep.
He just turns up, doesn't he? And
it's a very abrupt arrival, isn't it?
Yeah, he doesn't actually ask to join. Actually, Steve offers for him to join.
You are absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like quite unsure about it because because I think it's kind of a point of irony that he's a pilot, isn't he? And he's being, the sea troop, and he's like, not so sure about it at first. That's for sure.
It's also at this point that we start getting the awesome interplay between him, Klaus, and Zissou. With the fact that Klaus is clearly looking up to Zissou as kind of a father figure in his own right, and then actually having a literal son turn up is throwing his relationship with him into question as to where he stands in the pecking order.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just brilliant. From the offset, there are sparks between these two.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at this point, Eleanor starts to voice her concerns with the fact that she feels that Zissou is exploiting Ned, and eventually leaves the crew.
Well, yes. Is this before or after he invests into Team Zissou?
I believe it's after.
Yeah, because that's what. Yeah, because he's a bit of a has-been, isn't he? And he's not been making a lot of money with his documentary movies. And this movie that he's going to make about the shark is supposed to be his last ever movie, isn't it? His last hurrah.
It's meant to be a swan song or something.
And so Ned invests into him to help out on everything.
So at this point, we have the introduction of Jane, who comes to document the voyage. She's also, unrelated to the story, heavily pregnant as well. And at this point, you start to get a new triangle form between Ned and Zissou competing passively for her affections. Now, Klaus still continues to be jealous of Ned, and they occasionally come to not to, so much to blows, but the occasional slap, which is hilarious. Now, at this point, they break into a nautical laboratory run by Alistair Hennessy and steal some of the tracking equipment that he's keeping there, claiming that it's perfectly fine. Now, this Hennessy is Eleanor's ex-husband and Zissou's nemesis.
Yes, it's Jeff Goldblum, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, he's great.
He's only got one role that he can really play enjoyably, but fuck it if he doesn't do it well.
There's a really, I actually really like it. Actually, at the end of the film when all is said and done, and then Jeff Goldblum actually says to Jeff Goldblum's Alistair actually says to Bill Murray's that neither of us were very good fathers, though, really, were we? And it's like, no, or husbands rather, were we? Like, no, not really.
This does lead to a rather jarringly dark moment where the ship is attacked by Filipino pirates.
Yes.
And Bill Ubel, the corporate stooge who's been sent by the bonds company to make sure that they make good on their loans, is kidnapped by the pirates. Now, eventually Zissou snaps and goes on a one-man rampage throughout his ship, taking down the pirates by himself.
This is great. Seeing like Bill Murray like in his boxers, in a dressing gown, like gunning down loads of, it's very strange, but it's very funny.
You can't look away.
Yeah.
This eventually leads to almost all of the interns leaving, and Eleanor rejoins the crew at this point. At which point they put together a rescue mission to rescue Bill Ubel. Now, they discover the pirates have been staying in an abandoned hotel that Zissou frequented in his younger years, and they go in to rescue him. Now, I've just got to say for a moment, this rescue sequence has got the strangest music over the top, the most underwhelming kind of like everything goes against every rule of 80s action movies, and yet it works so well at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know. It cracks me up. And at this point, when he finally breaks and discovers the pirates, he discovers that Hennessy's been kidnapped at some point along the way as well.
Yes.
Who probably gets shot, but not fatally so. And they abscond from the hotel, heading back to the ship. And at this point, there is a rather touching moment with Klaus where Zissou turns to him and says, "You're the head of A-Team." And you can see the joy on his face, despite the fact he's in the middle of a firefight. That he just got everything he ever wanted. Now, once back on the ship, Ned and Zissou decide to search for the jaguar shark by helicopter, which has been reported in the past in the movie that is not in the best condition. There's a rather touching scene between Ned and Klaus just before he takes off, where they finally make their peace with each other. At which point the helicopter takes off and crashes, rather abruptly and jarringly in actual fact. And Ned dies in the crash due to his injuries. At this point, we get the revelation that Zissou is in fact sterile from Eleanor.
Mm-hmm.
So, a much more morose Zissou climbs aboard his submersible, along with pretty much, I think, the entire crew in that shot. And they descend into the water to find the shark. It's at this point, as it passes over them, that he decides he doesn't want to kill it anymore. Partially because of its beauty, but mainly because he's now out of dynamite. And it does have that quite haunting line where he just looks at it and says, "I wonder if it remembers me." And
so I can stop you there. While I have criticised the use of licensed music, the music in this section is actually very, very good.
Yeah, is this Life on Mars?
It's oh god, how I'm gonna murder it when I pronounce it. I'm gonna look how to pronounce it first. Let's do it.
Okay, we've got live pronunciation lessons.
I'm actually gonna Google right now. How do I pronounce this band's name? Just to increase the tension. Ready? Here it comes. Right. I'm going to play it in YouTube as well so I can hear it.
Sigur Rós.
There you go. So you pronounce it Sigur Rós, allegedly. So they're like an Icelandic. I've heard some call them dream pop, some call them post rock. I actually really, really like this band, and the twinkling, echoing guitars, massive amounts of space in the ambience, and obviously he sings in Icelandic, but he's got a very sweet, soothing voice. It really lends itself very well to like the to quote a song, aquatic ambience of them in this submersible underwater while looking at this beautiful, beautiful creature that they were originally going to kill. I actually thought like the music choice in this sequence and this whole sequence in general was like really well judged.
Yeah, it is it's actually quite a powerful moment that's filled with a lot of levity and everything. But
yeah.
It's at this point we come back to his documentary release at the premiere, and we discover that in actual fact, for the entirety of the release, Zissou has been sat outside of his own premiere, not even wanting to watch the movie. Most likely because of the pain and everything that entails.
Of course. Let's not forget that during the course of the movie, like the more that Ned is allowed to contribute to the documentary film, like it sort of represents the growing relationship between them. Like I want to put you back to that first moment when he asked him to be in it. It's when they're like filming that sequence on the beach by the
jellyfish. Yeah,
that's right. And he's holding the microphone, but he's holding it wrong. When you hold like a recording microphone, normally you hold it above the camera and above the presenters, but he was holding it below. And he asks a question, doesn't he? And it sort of like inspires Steve to keep talking about them. And then he turns around and says, "I want you in this." And if I remember correctly, it's when William Dafoe's got the Klaus. He says he doesn't even know how to hold a microphone, because he doesn't. But Steve is sort of inspired by his persistence, and like this sort of like represents like the start of their growing relationship, because this is when he asked him to be like part of the crew and part of the documentary. And like the more he gets involved in the film, it's almost like their growing relationship is documented over the course of the film. I'll sort of go on to the themes and why I think that's relevant as we when we sort of finish the wrap up, but the synopsis. But yeah, it's very poignant that he's sitting outside, because it is like the film is sort of like a statement on their relationship now at this point in the movie. So I thought it was like, quite fitting and quite poignant that he didn't want to go back in.
Yeah, and it's at this point that a young boy comes along, sits down next to him, and he gives him Ned's Zissou club ring, doesn't he?
Is this Kate Blanchett's son, isn't it? Is that right?
I believe so.
Oh, yeah, it's just some random kid. I can't remember.
I think
anyway.
Now I'm uncertain on it now. But nonetheless,
oh dear.
Picks the kid up, puts it on his shoulders, and walks down the steps with his crew in tow, with the intention of heading back to the ship to carry on his documentary life. Now, with that in mind, first question I want to address to you, Gav.
All right, okay.
Is firstly, now with the cast, it's got a similar level of cast as Tenenbaums, maybe a little bit less. Like it's a little bit more streamlined.
I don't know about that. I mean, it's got Marc and Gavin, Jeff Goldblum, William Dafoe. My God, it's a lot.
Once again, he's got some powerhouses here.
Yeah, Angelica Houston's is quite a common like actress in his films. And then I don't know, Kate Blanchett. She's got that. This is like probably like not long after Lord of the Rings, isn't it? As well.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
But with that in mind, do you feel that because one thing you said about Tenenbaums was that you felt that there was almost too many actors in that movie, that it was kind of didn't allow enough focus on certain people. So
yes.
Now, do you feel this movie allowed characters to breathe more and actually represent themselves better on screen compared to Tenenbaums?
Okay, let's think about this for a second then. So, like, is there more or less characters in this film? In the end, like, very similar themes, actually, to the Royal Tenenbaums. Very, very similar themes, just like portrayed in a different way. But let's not get into that in a sec.
I think if we're talking about main characters, I think there's probably about
I think it's about focus. I think there are as many characters in this movie, but there is a very, very, very distinct focus on specific characters because of the story that he's trying to tell.
Oh, well, Ned and Zissou, yeah.
Not just Ned, Zissou, and Jane. Jane is very, very important as well, symbolically to the narrative. Eleanor has her place, Klaus has his place, but it is very okay. Steve and Ned, and then I would say are like joint protagonists, and then like Jane, Kate Blanchett's character, sort of comes in after that, and then Klaus is definitely there as well. They all sort of have their part to play in the overriding narrative and themes. I think that in many ways this film is more successful than the Royal Tenenbaums because it allows more focus on its cast, and therefore the story has more clarity. I think that characterization is a problem in his films in general, but I think that because the focus is limited in this film, the flaws in his limited characterization do not reveal themselves so easily. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, by narrowing the lens, we don't see quite so many cracks. You know, I mean, let's be honest. There's loads of characters in this film. The crew, like so many of them, are characters. They're all caricatures. You know.
Yeah.
One
or two of them are one-note jokes in actual fact, but at the same time, they all have their part to play in the story.
They're just the crew, really, aren't they? They in the grand scheme of things, they just like fire a gun or whatever.
I did like that shot with the first reveal of the ship and everything, where it's one of his first uses, really, of miniatures, I suppose, or the combination of miniature and live action, where he pans up and shows the side-scrolling of the cutaway image of the ship.
I love his use of vintage special effects.
Yeah.
In general, you know, like the fish, for example, a lot of them are stop motion. Mm-hmm. I can imagine people maybe being a bit mystified by that, but I think it gives it a certain character. You know, I really, really like the stop motion effects, the miniatures especially. I mean, we'll be talking about miniatures for sure when we talk about, you know, the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely a lot of style, you know. But I think that the film is allowed to focus on its themes a lot more in this one. So
yeah, and that main theme is the relationship of a man who didn't really want to be a father and a son who just wants to know him. Essentially, I think that is the main story here.
I would say that's the main through line, yeah. But I mean, it actually has like, it's interesting how we've done this episode, Mark, because the reason why I said this week when you suggested doing this director, Wes Anderson, and I suggested these three films. I suggested these three films because they're the three films. I think you suggested Royal Tenenbaums, and I said these two because these are the two that I've seen. There was no reason for it. I haven't seen all of his other films, so I can't really say. But I think it is really like interesting and fitting that all three of these films have got some very, very similar themes.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know whether it runs through all of his films. Maybe it does. Obviously, a lot of directors do like return to the same ideas, but you know, this film is about making up for past mistakes regarding like relationships, isn't it? And trying to atone for them, which is exactly what Royal Tenenbaum is trying to do in the Royal Tenenbaums with his family, isn't it? But he is in that film forcing himself onto his family. But in this film, Ned sort of comes out of the blue to the father and says like, "Oh yeah, I'm your son, by the way." And like, Steve, Bill Murray's character, is sort of resistant to connecting with him.
Yeah, even though there's no demand, it's no emotional like cost of him or anything.
He doesn't even let him call him dad. He's like, "Why can't I call you dad?" Because Steve's cooler, But like he says earlier on, sorry, after you.
Yeah, I was going to say though, it did crack me up when he turns around and goes, "Personally, I would have called you Kingsley Zissou. Did you want to change your name?" And he goes, "No, I'm good with Ned."
There's also there's a very important line when Steve Zissou says, "I hate fathers." This is great characterization.
Because that's the one sentence, it implies a wealth of different possibilities behind that one line.
This says, potentially that his own father was crap and that this has affected him in the long run, and that That's why he doesn't want to be a father. He doesn't want to get involved. He doesn't want to be tied down. He's also obviously like a ship's captain. He's got these films, you know. Obviously, the revelation that he's sterile comes later, and importantly, it comes later because you're not supposed to.
Because
You know,
then that changes everything about how Zissou was acting with Ned.
yes, which is again a very, very important theme in this film, which also links with the next film, which I'll elaborate regarding the next film when we get to it. But I think, you know, what it's saying is that sometimes love and relationships don't need to be blood connected to be real, you know, to be meaningful. And like in the film, Ned's character is referred to as his son, isn't he? Which is very sad. Because by this point, you know that he's not a film in the documentary film that he won't watch, you know. And
despite the fact he knew that from the beginning, he still didn't immediately lead with that when he declared himself.
Yeah.
He saw that this means a lot to this kid.
Did he though? Because you don't know. Anderson doesn't give you the answers, which I think is, you know, the hallmark of a smart director. He wants his audience to infer it. This is, you know, sometimes it is better to let the audience make their own decisions because it makes the narrative more personal and you'll project yourself into it. Yeah. Did he though? Did he see that, or did he see a chance to have what he could never have? I know he said later on in the film, "I hate fathers," but you know, there's possible interpretations here. In the end, how you interpret it or not, as I mentioned earlier on, like the documentary film that they make sort of represents their relationship on camera, on candid camera, to use the phrase. And it's like an allegory for film in general, isn't it? Really, you know, and life. You know, it's like an allegory for, you know, home movies and capturing our lives in home movies and the importance of recording history and recording moments, you know.
Well, I also feel that the documentary film for this one was a lot more real than his previous documentaries. Because you see one of them played out earlier on in the movie and it shows him being much more heroic and kind of is that the sound of a Stoughton?
Yes. It's played with quirky humour, isn't it? It's very silly. It's very, very silly. Yeah. But it's interesting. This film has got like lots of when I was doing that, I did a bit of research. Some authors were referenced. I didn't know. Obviously, Herman Melville's Moby Dick was a.
That's an easy one to make a comparison.
It's an easy one.
Yeah.
You know, but because in the end, you know, Steve Zissou's chasing his white whale, you know, and it actually reminded me of Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea as well, which I have not seen mentioned. Because The Old Man and the Sea is about someone chasing a fish for a reason. The reason is more about proving something. And the catching of the fish is like the momentous moment. But taking the fish back with him is less important. Because it's more about an act of will, an act of importance. And basically the story is about this character, the old man, going to catch this fish and within the act of doing so, making a greater coming to a greater conclusion about himself, about humanity, and coming out a changed person. And that's exactly what happens to Steve in this. You know, he goes out to kill this fish that supposedly killed his best friend. He lost someone very close to him because of this fish, and then goes after this fish, and in the process discovers that he's given the opportunity to have a son, and by the end of it, it's changed. Allow me to point something else out that I picked up in this film, Mark. There's another film that I thought was quite relevant. It's quite a wide shot, Mark. I'm going to be honest. You might not agree with me. You might think I'm insane.
Oh, hit me, man.
Blade Runner.
Yeah, I'm just going to need to move some parts around in my head to make that fit. Give me a moment here. What?
Steve Zissou is Rocker Hauer. You know, he goes to kill him, but he doesn't want to. He goes to kill the shark, and he doesn't want to. He lets him live because.
And then he makes a reference to "Wonder if he remembers me." That kind of
yeah. obviously completely coincidental. But no, I saw it.
Okay,
It's
man.
there.
I'll give you that one to a degree.
You want to mention this to your wife?
Yeah.
She needs to see this.
Well, both these movies are both personal loves of hers. She loves both these.
Then
very
you can
much.
tell her favourite film of all time has links to this movie. Tell her.
That's valid. Okay, I look forward to seeing her.
I'll write an essay on it. She doesn't. Anyway. Yeah, it's very moving when he goes to, obviously he says, I haven't got dynamite anyway. A line that I feel is kind of, I would have cut it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I think that for the Anderson tone, though, I mean, we've talked about this tonal dissonance that you felt was in the previous one.
Yeah. I agree with you there.
Do you feel that this has got tonal dissonance in the way in which Ned is dispatched and then that leads into this scene?
No, I don't. No, I don't think so. The tonal dissonance is actually comes from him saying, I want you to kill it, but I could have killed it, but I'm not going to. We can't anyway. Well, what was the point of saying you're going to kill it? What was the point? You ran out of dynamite. I mean, then I suppose you have to ask yourself, well, why did he go and look for it in the first place? Maybe that's more important. But personally, unless I'm not seeing what Anderson and his writers were trying to say with this scene, it could be to do with that. I probably would have cut that line and just have him say no.
I feel the reason he went looking for the shark finally was because Ned had just died helping him search for it. And he didn't want Ned's death, because it was almost a pointless death. It was a death that could have been avoided.
It is a pointless death. Yes, you're right.
And and I felt he wanted to, at the very least, have something to show for the loss of his son. He had already lost his best friend.
I think you're right. Actually, I think you're right there. I think that he sort of comes into this movie. Steve Zissou comes into this movie with sort of Bill Murray's general performance is a sort of disinterested old boy. That's his characterization across the board, really, isn't it?
One shot I still can't get out of my head is when he's talking to the journalist. He's in that full scuba outfit, and they're talking about the helmets have bunny ear on it so they can pipe music in whilst they're diving. And it's just the uncomfortable little dance he does as the music plays, and it's just
he's very good in this.
It's so good that he's got the perfect level of awkward, but not like slapstick or anything like that. He gets it just right, and it cracks me up every time I watch that scene.
Mm-hmm.
So he is a master of comedy.
I forgot what I was going to say now. You've totally ruined this podcast. That's it.
Shut it down, people. We're finished.
That's it. I've completely forgotten what I was going to say now.
I distracted you with dancing Bill Murray.
You did, yeah. Easily done. I completely lost my train of thought.
But talking about shark diving, reason for...
Yeah, I think... Why? Oh yeah. Why he went for the shark in the first place, and then you feeling like you have to see it for the end. Yeah. What I was going to say was that he comes into this movie on a mission, basically because his best friend's killed, and he's going to do it, and it's his last hurrah. And then he acquires a new perspective. He has character growth, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He does go. He goes on the hero's journey effectively in this movie, and he faces consequences, and he comes out different in it. And that difference is discovering, having a replacement for his best friend in a brand new son, having a new experience by being a father figure to this son, and then losing that son, all in the space of an hour and a half of film time. And I think that's enough, to change someone. In the end, it is like a relationship, a life, told over a period of time, beginning, middle, and end, and it makes a lot of sense that it would change him. But why he would go and see the shark? He said, yeah.
I mean, in a way, it's almost been the focus of the entire movie up until this point.
Well, that's right.
And it is allowed to move. In the scene of the actual reveal, it's allowed to breathe, and you get the line about the dynamite and stuff. But for the most part, it's treated with reverence.
Yes. And maybe there's an irony there. Because it is beautiful. It is a beautiful thing that killed his son, his best friend, and his son. Oh, I suppose that's what it is. The shark is the killer, really, because the shark is what kills his son as well.
I think that was more the pursuit of the shark was what killed his son.
That's what I'm saying. Then that's what I'm saying. That's what it represents. And then why wouldn't he kill it at the end, eh? Too much death already.
Yeah.
Too much death. And such a beautiful thing that did it, effectively, that weird looking thing that did it.
Huh.
It's interesting. It's interesting. I actually think this is a very good movie. To be honest with you, I do like it a lot. It does lose me. I think it's a bit too long, if I'm honest.
Do you mean things like when they stole the equipment and stuff like that and all that?
Yeah. Well, there is the funny joke at the end where Jeff Goldblum goes, "Is that my coffee machine?" Like, yeah, it's my machine. Why not? Yeah, that was funny. But like, yeah, I do feel like to talk about like what I'm going to talk about in a minute. Like the Grand Budapest Hotel is half an hour shorter than this movie. Although there's less characters, and that is a good length. And I don't know. I do feel like not every joke lands in this movie. Not every moment hits in this movie. But what does hit is very effective.
Well, me myself, this is a movie that it wasn't one of the first Wes Andersons I watched. I actually came to this later, and it's one of those ones I was glad I saved because this is a real good treasure. It was a lot of fun to just because I had one or two friends that had hyped it a little to me, not much, but they'd kind of turned around and goes, "Oh, you're a Wes Anderson fan, but you haven't seen Aquatic yet. Like, make some time for it, man." And that was about as high as the hype went. And now I can see what they were banging on about. They didn't want to ruin anything about it, and it gave so many fantastic performances from so many characters that I hadn't seen play certain roles like that before. I mean, coming back to Willem Dafoe, we are used to this man like ripping the knobs off in terms of sort of like cackling crazy in one capacity or another. But this was a lot more of an understated role from him. A lot more of a, what's the word I'm looking for here? I'm just trying to think of the name of the ship's mate to Ahab in Moby Dick. I can't
remember.
He'll come to me later. But nonetheless, the fact that he plays, up until that point, he'd been the right-hand man of Zissou. And that whole role that he played in terms of the competition with Ned. I love that storyline. And I love the utter joy on his face when he stood next to the helicopter and he says, "You understand me?" I also loved Hennessy's performance as well, with Jeff Goldblum. Just for what is essentially meant to be the main antagonist of the movie, unless you count the shark. He's so passively laid back, it's almost hilarious. There's no sort of like conniving to him or anything like that. Even though he's painted up to be this bad guy from the Zissou's perspective, he actually comes across as quite a nice guy for the most part. Maybe a little bit smarmy at times, and a little bit of a dick at the premiere, but nothing that warrants sort of like he's my nemesis. This movie, whilst it was critically praised on the same sort of level as Tenenbaums when it first came out.
No, was it? No one liked it.
Oh, I must have misread different things then.
Yeah. Basically, the film bombed, like critically and commercially. It was.
I heard it commercially bombed. Absolutely, yeah. I heard
critically, people like what I have read is that people have turned around on it over time. You know, considering that this film came out on the back of Bill Murray's performance in. For some reason, I want to say Just Like Honey, but that's the fucking Jesus and Mary chain song that's in the bloody film. That film we talked about a minute ago by Coppola. Anyway, obviously he was critically acclaimed in that film, and then when this came out, like from what I've read, people critics are saying that they didn't care for it, and that it's become a cult classic in retrospect over time as critics have reappraised it. I'd love to read Roger Ebert's review, actually. Why did I not think of doing that? That was silly. I normally read his reviews. But, anyway, what I was about to say is that quite surprises me that this film was not
well received.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I do think it's a bit too long. I
find that surprising as well. Like, I mean, I can tell that sort of like it's once again got that Anderson aspect of it doesn't necessarily follow. I mean, it's got the basics of what a narrative, a beginning, middle, and end. You've got your pyramids and everything in there, but the way in which he plays with tone of scenes and everything can push some people away. Like, for instance, the way in which Ned dies is so fast that you could blink and you could miss it in terms of the actual events leading up to it, and then suddenly, oh, wait, he's dead. Like, there's no sort of like you would normally get in a movie where you get any more dramatic sort of drawing out of the moment or anything in that sort of.
That's right. That's why I think it sort of mixes in well with the idea of like a home movie or the documentary of a life, because like I said, they literally have an entire relationship, don't they?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, he is lost when there is an understanding, but maybe like the journey is just as important because it's about the growth of the characters, the growth of Steve Zissou over the course of the movie.
Well, do you have anything else to say towards this, man?
No, not really. I mean, like the truth is, you could rewatch it a couple more times and like look for more and more themes,
Yeah.
and more ideas. This is like I think I'm pretty sure I watched it for the first time like I don't know 15 years ago, so it's been a while. And watching it again this time. Oh, that's the other theme. Sorry. No, there is something else I need to say. Kate Blanchett's character, Jane Winslet Richardson, who is pregnant, which is interesting because Owen Wilson's character, Ned Plimpton, starts a relationship with her. He meets her when she's reading to her son in her belly. And he sort of proposes to be the father of the son eventually, sort of becomes like this would-be suitor, which again sort of correlates with these characters like Steve Zissou being a father figure to Klaus Daimler, although the relationship is very simple, but also being a father figure to Ned himself. There's families in this movie that are not bonded by blood, and it's all over it.
Now, the idea is sometimes you make your family rather than.
I want to know because I inferred that like at the end it's Kate Blanchett's son at the end or whatever. Anyway, Blanchett's character's son, whatever. Anyway, it is a boy, and again, Steve Zissou is sort of being like an older friend to this young boy after the premiere of the documentary movie. So, that's showing growth, isn't it? He is able to talk to children, maybe being friends with children. Maybe he's going to be a father figure to that character. Now, who knows? But, that is symbolic of the journey that he's been on.
Yeah, he's opened up a lot more compared to what he was.
That's right. He was like half a person before, maybe because he's in career burnout as well as losing his friend, poor with no money and whatever,
Yeah.
It is like quite a powerful message regarding family. Plenty of fathers and mothers have married into children, and become stepfathers, real fathers, and learned to love children, as unequivocal, as intensely, as properly as a real father, and like as I said, like regardless of probably the other films, I could extrapolate by rewatching this the first, more than for a third or fourth or fifth time, and reading more reviews and reading more essays and whatever. Like, what draws me to fiction in the first place is characterization and a good character arc, the hero's journey, whatever you want to call it. And for me, this story does have like a good, clean character arc for Steve Zissou's character, and that's why I think this film is actually quite successful. That's why I find it amazing that people just like this film. Maybe it was just too quirky. Maybe people weren't used to Anderson style yet. I don't know. I mean,
because it does lean more into it than Tenenbaums was more of a family drama. But
so
whilst he played up more his camera angles to a degree in this one compared to the other,
it's not the angles. I don't think I
think it's the slightly awkward humor at times.
Yes, it's the whimsy and the weird, quirky humor.
So it kind of like he leans into his style more in this movie than he did in Tenenbaums.
I wouldn't say that this is a particularly funny movie. It's like it's the kind of movie that's funny about you find it funny about laughing at it. Which is not the same thing I can say for the next film, which I think is very funny. So, it's interesting. It's a funny old movie. I definitely think I'm going to have to watch it again at some point,
Let it breathe for a little while and come back to it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's a Bill Murray comedy, and I don't think there's many bad ones of those.
No, he cries in it as well, man.
Yeah.
Fucking cries in it. That's not something you see very often. Pretty sure he squeezes a tear in Scrooged, but like, how often does he cry in a movie?
Yeah.
Whether you like Bill Murray or not, plenty of people out there don't like him. He is very good in this. He is very, very good.
Yeah.
And running around firing that pistol in a box of shorts, dressing me out.
Was finishing it while flinging the gun itself off the edge.
Yeah. That is definitely an image that's going to stay with me for a very, very, very long time. Bear in mind also though, the Yellow Submarine, That's a pretty big reference, isn't it? You know, it's a
Well,
pretty
Beatles.
big reference. Yeah. And then you actually have all the like the weird like sea life and stuff.
Almost
Maybe
like
with
the animation from that.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe I'm not sure what thematically that represents, but there's definitely like visual feeling and visual storytelling. Sorry, there is actually a couple more things I wanted to say because now
Oh,
you
keep
called
going,
me
man.
on it now. There are. I really like how the documentary style that is suggested in his films is sort of carried over in a fourth wall breaking manner in the film itself. For example, in the way that he introduces the ship and addresses the audience. I really love that. And then you get like the explanation of the ship, and you get the cutout, and you get to see all the floors, the side, the side view, the map
Yeah,
of it.
that
It's
visual
all
diorama
explained.
was just
That's
very
it.
nicely done. Yeah.
Very detailed and very cool to look at. You know, lots of really. One thing I will say actually as well about the camera, talking about the camera angles, is because he it reminded me of like 1966 Batman at times. When people look at things in their hands, there's no transition shot. It just goes to a completely straight image of their hands holding it completely equilateral in the frame, and then it just goes back to them not looking at it anymore. Very strange, very strange. It reminded me of like Thunderbirds and Batman from the 60s. Intentional or not, it's just what I thought of. But yeah, I loved how tonally it sort of played itself as like a documentary from like the 60s. He does seem to sort of love like 60s cultural visual theming and
Well, this is
the
another movie where
chapters.
it'd be difficult to try and place it in terms of timeline, like as to where
Yeah,
when this occurs. I mean, this could be any
yeah,
time between the 60s and the 90s, or
yeah. And the way, yeah, like the chapters, the font of the chapters, you know, yeah. I do again, like I said, I feel like I'd have to watch it another time so I could really give you like the real nitty gritty of what I would cut. But I do feel like that's my one complaint is that I feel like it could have been a bit tighter. But maybe I'm saying that and I'm missing some things though. Maybe I'm missing some themes, you know. But
no, I think you've made a pretty good
although
summation of it. Yeah.
well, like I said, like that's what I like about movies. That's what pleases me in movies. That's what what hooks me in movies. It's a core human story at the center of it,
Yeah.
you know. And that is immediately what is I liked. Maybe it's because my parents divorced when I was younger, although my father, me and my father's relationship is what it was and whatever. Maybe like because my parents divorced, anything, maybe any film that's sort of about a son and a father's relationship immediately appeals to me because
There's
of
always
my
going to
own
be a
experience.
connection.
Yeah, it's what I'm bringing to the film, which again is a strength for a film like this because the film allows you to infer it. I imagine maybe if you don't really understand what it's like to not have your father with you, like a parent, like we're having co-parenting, you probably just view like Steve Zissou as a bit of a twat, a bit of an arse,
Oh, yeah,
not a
on some
very.
levels he is,
He is.
but
He's a
the thing
womanizer.
is,
He's a
yeah,
womanizer, isn't he? That's the thing straight away. He's a bit of a
yeah,
womanizer. He's not like a great person, but then he doesn't need to be. He's a great person. He has flaws, and in the end, he tries to do a good thing, and that's what makes his characterization appealing in this film. You know,
you can
his
see him trying to
relationship
better
with
himself. Yeah,
his relationship with Eleanor, Angelica Houston's character, is very cold, very cold. She's very aloof, very austere. Like she's just had enough of him. She doesn't give a shit. It's insinuated that she's got like at one point that she's got like a fucking a personal masseur, and he goes and sees her after she gives up, which is kind of
which is
weird,
quite clearly sort of like there's a whole
Yeah,
bunch of sort of like
yeah,
context there that.
yeah. But that says a lot about their relationship immediately, Um, this is about Steve Zissou's character. This is a man who is just a bit of a tired person, not a great person, but at least like tries to do something good for someone, regardless of whether he needs to or not. In the end, this is the thing. He knew that he's obviously sterile. Of course he knew, because Eleanor knew. He could have turned around and gone, "Don't be fucking stupid, mate.
This
I
is what I
can't
was
have
saying.
kids.
Yeah,
Get
exactly.
fucked.
But
Get
he made
fucked."
the choice. Maybe you could argue that he's doing it with the potential of exploiting Ned. Well, maybe he
I
didn't.
don't think
But
so. I
this is
don't
it.
think so.
But I know what you mean. I feel that he was more I think he saw someone who had just lost his mother, and he didn't want to take his illusion of a father away from him.
There's whichever way you interpret it, I believe there is goodness in whatever he sets out to do.
Yeah.
With it, whatever makes him take Ned on board. So
Yeah.
and I think that's like the key of this story, really. The key character moment, the key characterization is that a person, regardless of their upbringing, a person who has been through this and done this and whatever, is not a great person. When given the opportunity, rises to the challenge and tries to do something admirable and comes out better for it in the end. And as far as I'm concerned, that makes this a successful movie.
Yeah.
That's all I've got to say. I promise.
Well, I'm glad it elicited such a response from you, man.
Yeah, I like this movie a lot. I like it.
You and me both. It is one of Anderson's classics, as far as I'm concerned. This is one of his greats. With that in mind, I think we're going to dive into a break now, and we're going to come back with the final part of the pod today, which is going to be on the Grand Budapest Hotel. So we will catch you in a moment. Okay, welcome back. And at this point, we're going to be going into the final chapter of our podcast today, and that's going to be an analysis of the Grand Budapest Hotel. Now, once again, going down the cast, we have Ralph Fiennes playing Monsieur Gustav H. We have Tony Revolori and F. Murray Abraham both playing Zero in young and old versions. Adrian Brody playing, let's see how I do with this name, Dmitry Desgovan Taxis. Willem Dafoe playing J.G. Joplin. Saoirse Ronan playing Agatha.
You're going to be a while, man. You're going to be a while.
Edward Norton playing Albert Henkels. Jeff Goldblum playing Vilmos Kovacs. And Jude Law playing the author.
You've also forgotten Tom Wilkinson as author.
Oh, is he the grown-up author?
Yeah. Tilda Swindon as well. As Madam D, Owen Wilson as M. Chuck, like it just goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah,
Harvey Keitel.
Keep it. Oh my God, Harvey Keitel! Like, what the hell was that cameo? That was
know, right? What the fuck, mate? I never thought I'd see Harvey Keitel naked with fucking tattoos like that. Fuck me.
And it's utterly brilliant. Like,
yeah.
Let's get into it.
So yeah.
Okay, so. This movie starts with an interesting way in which it penetrates into the narrative. Like it's a multi-level entry into this story. Because it first starts with a woman visiting the shrine of the author, at which point she's holding his book, which is one of his stories, The Grand Budapest Hotel. At which point the perspective shifts to the story that's taking place in the story of the book, being read by the author. Which leads into his experiences going to the Grand Budapest Hotel in the 60s. Whereupon he met the owner of the hotel, Zero Mustaf. And Zero then starts to recount his story of how he came into possession of the hotel. Now, at this point, I think we're about 2 or 3 levels deep before we even actually get into the actual true narrative. It's very noticeable that you kind of have to shift down from levels, Inception style, in order to sort of like finally get to the true story.
It's called Story Within a Story, or Frame Narrative, and this is actually pioneered by the Arabian Nights. Did you know that?
And that's wherein stories that are told to the Sultan by the.
Correct. The prisoner tells stories to the Sultan to prolong their life.
Yeah.
And then over the course of the story, the Sultan sort of changes their mind and sort of like softens. But yes. It's interesting. I've got a lot to say actually about all this. There's quite a lot of interesting. I've got a few takes to say about all that. So anyway, onwards. Sorry.
Okay, so we start with our main character here. This would be Gustav, played by Ralph Fiennes, and straight off the bat, surreal to look at because I haven't seen too much of Ralph Fiennes in much other stuff other than Harry Potter, obviously.
Oh, really?
And this is a far departure from anything he's done in that direction for me.
This is the reason why he did this movie. He was actually I was reading, surprised to be asked even into this movie because he was so used to playing villains and jumped at the chance.
Absolutely. And you can see he is 100% committed to this character. He is just fucking goes for it.
Oh, yeah.
And at least starts with him discovering that behind his back, a young lobby boy by the name of Zissou has been hired, pending his approval. Now, through Zero's eyes, we start to get a bit of an understanding of who Gustav is. And he is a hotel sommelier that engages with multiple affairs with his guests, including one Celine Villeneuve Desgoff and Taxis. I'm getting really good at pronouncing these names. Who, after a visit, dies a month later. And during that time, it comes to light that a will is to be read. And immediately, Gustav takes Zissou and the two of them head to the estate to see the will reading and to witness it. At which point, Gustav discovers that he has been willed Boy with Apple, a Renaissance painting that he's utterly in love with himself. And this leads to understate a little bit of consternation on Adrian Brody's part. I mean, I'm not going to sort of like repeat the F-bomb that he drops in the movie, but I kind of it cracks me up, man. The way
Adrian Brody again is like, while he is a caricature, let's be honest.
Yes,
he's very, very. We're back into caricature territory. He's very funny, very, very good in this.
At which point he decides that I'm taking this painting. So him, and with a little bit of prodding from Zissou, he takes the painting and heads back to the hotel where he hides it in the safe. Shortly afterwards, oh no, my apologies, I've already missed the sequence in which we're introduced to Edward Norton's Albert Henkel's on the train when they're going out to there, and they discover that Zissou doesn't actually have any official documentation on which to be in the country. And Henkel's, because he feels a debt of gratitude to Gustav for the way he acted as a boy, agrees to issue him with a temporary visa. Moving on, we then come back to the hotel, at which point Henkel's has been dispatched out to arrest Gustav because it has been discovered that Celine Villeneuve has been killed by strychnine poisoning. Which leads to that wonderful delivery like, she was murdered. And you think I did it? Followed immediately with him attempting to run.
Yeah. This is like a great example where, for my money, like Anderson's framing and pacing style works absolutely coherently and perfectly with the quirky surreal comedy. It is absolutely harmonious, and it makes this film like it's just the way things are framed and how the physical comedy sort of twitches from one scene to another. It's absolutely hilarious, and this is one of those perfect examples. It's almost British in its humour because it's so subtle, very funny. This scene especially, Fiennes is like superb at the physical comedy, like a real like mime artist, you know.
Yep, he's got the body language and everything.
Oh, it's superb, so funny.
Yeah. Now this leads to Gustav being arrested, and this is one of my favourite moments. I have to be honest. Where I mean, there's one thing you'll find in a lot of Wes Anderson movies, that he breaks one of the rules, which he has his characters talk directly into the camera when they're in mid-conversation, and it'll flick back and forth between them. And when that sequence where he's just sat talking to Zissou during the meeting room whilst he's in jail, and he starts referring to the fact that one thing we don't do is let people know that we're a candy ass, and everything about that just cracks me up. It's just, and it was very poignant the way in which he was talking directly to the camera at that point. It's something you don't see in any other movies, really, like to that sort of level. But Anderson utterly uses it, and it's become iconic to his style. Now, we eventually lead up to him being brought into Ludwig's gang, because it turns out they actually quite like him. And they break out with the help of Agatha, sneaking tools into the prison through the use of Mendel's cakes. Now, whilst this is all going on, Dmitri sends out Jopling to kill Kovacs, and then Sergei's sister. Sergei is... Who is Sergei? Sergei is the butler of Celine Villeneuve, who has been attempting to try and inform Gustav that there is, in actual fact, a second will. Now, during this time, Gustav and Zissou reunite once outside the jail. And at this point, he contacts the Society of Crossed Keys, which is, for want of a better term, kind of like a Freemason-style brotherhood of hotel owners across the world who are all ready to help each other
Very
at the
funny.
moment's notice.
This is very funny.
Several quick-fire cameos of different actors.
Yeah.
Leading up to, well, not leading up, he starts it off, and he's the one who turns up. That is our man, Bill Murray. In a very small cameo, but still, he has his moment as well. So, not chewing the scenery or anything like that, but still a very nice, pleasant hello from him. At this point, they locate Serge, and he explains to them the fact that a second will exists before he is almost immediately and actually quite quickly dispatched by a Joplin. This leads to the snow chase, which is fucking hilarious. This sequence of them tobogganing down a mountain, chasing after Joplin, who's on skis.
Absolutely love this sequence. Absolutely love how like intentionally everything is like stop motion and sped up like a Benny Hill movie. Like absolutely brilliant.
Yep, and it is the kind of, it's not model work, isn't it? It's just the way it looks.
Brilliant.
And the shot of Zissou steering the toboggan with Gustav behind him, leaning over each shoulder and dodging from side to side was
the hyper speed fucking like background flying by as well. Oh, it's absolutely hilarious. Absolutely brilliant.
And it also leads to quite possibly the funniest moment for me in this movie, wherein due to their toboggan crashing, too many syllables there. Gustav ends up hanging off the edge of a cliff with the snow cracking, and Joplin looking down at him, stamping on the snow and cracking it, at which point he realizes his days are numbered, and he starts to recite a poem. Midway through a sentence, Zissou sneaks up and pushes Joplin off the cliff. And Gustav just lapses from his poem, going, "You fucking got him!" And
it's so good.
I had tears in my eyes the first time I saw that. It was, yeah. Now, Henkels is now in close pursuit. Got them in sight, wanting to try and track them down. They've decided that they're going to get the painting, sell it on the black market, and just get the hell out of this country, which this country itself is actually a fictional country. It's not one that exists in real life, and it's given the implication that this is taking place during some form of occupation of a fascist nation. There's no countries mentioned, there's no insignia or anything, although there are some insignia that could be alluded to being similar to other stuff. But no one ever says any words like Nazi or anything like that, despite the fact it's heavily implied that's what's happening.
Yeah, it's very obvious, yeah.
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 And they return to the hotel to discover it's been turned into a headquarters and barracks for said fascist occupying force. Now, Agatha tries to sneak through the hotel in a bid to steal the painting and gets noticed by Dmitri, who stalks her through the hotel. And I mean, literally, he is 2 seconds away from twirling his moustache as he walks through those corridors, the way in which he stalks her. And it leads up to a comical gunfight sequence, which comes out of nowhere, in terms of him drawing his pistol and attempting to shoot Gustav, who has snuck into the hotel with Zissou in tow, both dressed as Mendel's bakers. And it leads to all the soldiers pulling out their respective guns. And
this is great. This is great.
It's just
it works really well with his like the shot of like the two different sides of the balconies and everything being like perfectly placed and and symmetrical, and then like fast cuts from like both sides of just them just standing there firing their guns like mannequins. It's very funny, very funny.
Yeah. Now it's due to a sequence of events which involve Agatha falling out of a window and hanging from a balcony as the wrapping around the painting tears. She discovers the letter from Serge, the details of the second will. Soon, Henkels gets everyone together, wraps them up in the ballroom, and reads out the will, at which point Gustav inherits everything because it is discovered that in the event of the madam's murder, he has been named as the sole beneficiary. Now, at this point, the movie almost accelerates a little bit. It's not tying bows quickly, but it is the way in which that payoff is delivered is exceptionally fast. It's almost plays as an image with a voiceover over the top. You don't actually hear any dialogue from that scene. Then it accelerates to him, Zissou, and Agatha on a train. In very much a similar sequence as to when he was pulled over the first time by the occupying force, who are now evading again, apparently. However, this time, it doesn't go quite as well, and he's taken off the train. You don't see this, it is just explained later. He was shot on the side of the tracks. And Zissou is in actual fact named as his beneficiary in the event of his death, he inherits everything as well. And this is how he came into possession of the hotel. And it also leads to the actually quite heartbreaking line of revelation that Agatha died 2 years later from Prussian grip whilst pregnant with his child. And at this point, the story almost just wraps itself back up. It raises back up through its multiple levels and ends of a man who just delivered the story of another man. It is a strange ending, isn't it?
I think it's the biggest flaw of the movie. I think I'm not really a fan of the ending. Really.
I mean, as much I just straight off the bat, I fucking love this movie. This is the first movie I watched knowing who Wes Anderson is. Like, I went in with the intent of seeking out a movie that was Wes Anderson, and this had come out, and I was like, I'm going to watch that one. I'd seen one or two of his movies in the past, but not realizing who he was. But this was one that I sought out with the intention of watching because it's Wes Anderson, and on almost every level it delivered. However, you are right, the ending, which we'll go into more detail in a bit, it does feel a little flat by comparison to the rest of the movie. So, let's start with the through line that we seem to have established. This is a relationship of Gustav and Zero at the end of the day, isn't it?
Mm.
And as
Yes. However, I don't think it's the strongest part of the movie, Jay. It's funny. It's strange, you know. Like, Zero is something of like a caricature. And talking about caricatures in general in this movie, like in Wes Anderson movies, this film sort of goes back to being full of caricatures.
Oh, yes.
And like, for my money, there's only one real character in this movie, and that's Gustav. Everyone else is nothing. He's like just, you know, a joke, basically, a joke character or an idea represented by an actor to fulfill a part in a film. They don't feel like
about
real
Brody
people.
or Joplin or
All of them,
Kovacs and all that.
Yeah, all of them. So, Mr. Mustafa Zero, who is revealed to be Zero, isn't he? Eventually,
Yeah.
At the end of the movie. Do you recognise this actor?
No, yeah, he was in Spider-Man, wasn't he? He played Flash. Although that's probably not the illusion that you were making. So.
No. I'm talking about the older version.
Oh no, F. Murray Abraham.
Yeah.
I can't place any movies off the top of my head, but I recognise him.
He's the villain in Star Trek Insurrection.
Holy shit! Did not. I wouldn't.
He's been in a million films.
Yeah, he's one of those guys.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I just had to get that off my chest. It's funny. While Gustav and Zero's relationship is in effect the central point of the movie, I don't think it is the purpose of the movie and its most important theme. Really, like I said, Zero's characterization is very limited. He doesn't really say a lot. He just does things. Really, he sort of acts as an extension of Gustav. You know, what is it their role is in the hotel? How do you pronounce it?
Is it Somalia? Is it
concierge? That's it. Concierge, right? Yeah, concierge. You know, I feel like Zero is more of this. My general feelings about the film, like. This film uses a few narrative tricks. As I mentioned earlier on, it uses the story within a story concept, but it also has like, I can't think of the technical term for it, but I'm going to give you one. I'm going to make one up. It has what I would call like protagonist dissonance. So, like, usually within a narrative, you're introduced to the protagonist and you follow the protagonist through the story, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what happens. Who is the protagonist of this story, would you say?
No, it's Gustav.
Effectively, it's Gustav, that's right. But
you're witnessing it. Yeah, you're witnessing it through Zero's eyes.
Exactly. And so, like, the purpose of this story is the perception of Gustav through another character. You know, I mean, the story within a story, basically. And there is some like really interesting discourse within the themes of this movie. Like the first shot of the movie is that person at the grave of the author, who that we then find out is the author reading the story. And then we find out the author is, it's inferred that the author is Jude Law interviewing Mr. Mustafa, who then tells the author a story about, how he acquired the hotel, which is a story about another person. And then we learn that Mustafa is Zero, through the course of the story. As you mentioned, it's like Inception's level of story within a story within a story. But what is the real story in this movie? What is the truth? Is there a truth?
Because there's so many connections of narrator. There's the possibility for it being,
as you mentioned, it's not set in a real place, and the villains are not real fascists. They're like made up like cartoon character versions of fascists. Mm-hmm. It's like a dream-like version of the Nazis. It's like a child's rendition of the Nazis, isn't it? It's not the real version. It's someone else's weird interpretation of them. And yet, at the same time, this film purports to exist in the real world. So, things happen in this movie that are odd, that are strange, despite the fact that it's trying to be like a realistic movie, despite the fact it's also a story within a story within a story within a story. And, like, I think there are two, like, takeaways from this movie overall. Like, as I said to you a minute ago, whose story is this? Yes, I do think it is Gustav's story. Gustav is the protagonist. And I think,
for a start, he's the most interesting person to watch in this movie.
He is the only interesting person in this film.
I disagree. I feel there are multiple.
Disagree.
I find that they're interesting when they interact with him.
Exactly, because of him. Because of him.
Yeah.
He literally pulls people out of sterility into action because he's such a character of agency. Like. He lives the concierge life to its fullest, to maximum. He's like 24/7. When he finds out that someone's hiding behind his back, he's like, "Well, you must prove to be the other, but you're worthy of working here." And basically, he's like a bloody drill sergeant almost.
Oh, when he interviews him in the lift and everything.
Yeah.
But that does lead to that quite sweet moment where he turns around and goes, "Tell me, why do you want to be a lobby boy?" And he goes, "Who wouldn't want to be a lobby boy in the Grand Budapest Hotel? It's an institution." And that's the first time you see his expression soften for a moment. He goes, "Very good." And it's that first acknowledgement that there is more to him than just being a stern. There's more to him than his job. Whilst his job is a lot to him, he has a softer side.
I think that is indicative of his characterization. Him saying that, I think it is saying that he takes his job very, very seriously, and he recognizes it as being important, and his position is important. And to tell someone who thinks this, I want to do what you do because I think it's important, is not only smart, but is like telling of both of the character, both forms of characterization. I mean, I don't think Zero was saying it on purpose.
He genuinely meant it.
He genuinely meant it, which is like the start of their friendship, really, isn't it? When he sort of realizes they're on an even level.
Okay, they have a similar understanding.
But, this is a heist movie, isn't it? It's a caper.
Yeah.
At its core, it is like a series of, like, crazy events that just sort of, like, happen one after another.
It's by the time that you're getting to the prison sequence, it does start to take on almost a fever dream quality.
Well, that's what I was saying to you earlier on about how it's about authorship. The story is about authorship.
And how reliable is the narrator.
Yeah. This is where the through line comes in with the Life Aquatic, because the Life Aquatic is about a relationship that's not actually real, but it doesn't matter that it's not real. It's about the feelings that are there. And I almost feel like this film is like a commentary on film itself and about storytelling, and how it's not whether or not the story is truthful or not is not relevant. It's
how it makes
the feelings,
feel.
the feelings that you feel in it, personally. Like Gustav is like absolutely at the heart of this. He sort of represents like this almost infallible protagonist. He goes through absolute fucking hell in this movie, absolute hell. And yes, much like we like to see as Anderson likes to show us, life can be very cruel and very abrupt, and his ending is very abrupt and very cruel.
Yeah, It hurts a little
Until
bit. Like when
it
he's like,
does, it does, because you like him so much. That's
yeah.
why, because he goes through so
It's the fact that
much.
he's had such a fantastic story, then he dies in not mundane, but just it's viciously abrupt in the way in which it's delivered, compared to the rest of this movie, which has like a strong narrative story of sort of like the good guys overcoming the bad guys, and then just like that, due to just a random chance meeting of these soldiers or a death like the death squad.
Hmm.
I mean, they don't even show any sequence of him being shot or anything like that. It is literally just
No,
delivered
he's
by
told off.
Abraham
Yeah.
himself. He just turns around, and goes, and they shot him.
The fact he dies is not important, though, is it?
Yeah,
I don't think.
I say actually, it's almost like a Cormac McCarthy delivery in that
Yeah,
regard.
literally in that regard, yeah, you're right. But it's not important to the narrative, is it? Like, it's funny. There's like the most important line in this movie, for my money, is when the revelation, because obviously his partner, what's her name? Is it Agatha? Is that right?
Yeah.
Agatha
Yeah.
and his child
Both
die
with
long
my
after.
girlfriend.
Yeah, and then he turns around and reveals that the reason why he kept the hotel going was because of her memory.
Yeah.
And when you watch this, was you not thinking it was because of Gustav?
Yeah.
Were you not shocked that he said Agatha?
Yeah. That surprised me.
How do you feel about that? That's complicated, isn't it? It's complicated, isn't it?
That's loaded with kind of trickery there, because you can see that he has a connection with both of them for different reasons. I mean, obviously he loved Agatha dearly, even though he was only with her for like 2 years, like 30 years earlier.
2 years that you don't see, ironically.
Yeah.
After 2 years after, that's the thing. The story is about Gustav, but the reason why which is how he got the hotel, and then to summarize, the reason why he kept it for the next 20, 30, 40 years is because of those 2 years that he spent with Agatha afterwards, which we don't even see.
Yeah,
I mean,
you have no idea what occurred during that time.
No, you don't. You know, the film is lying to you, because in terms of like visual storytelling, that's what I meant by protagonist dissonance. Is that the protagonist is sort of portrayed from afar, from a distance, and you, the viewer, are given the perspective of the main character is through another character, so it's biased, isn't it? It's not necessarily the truth, because you're seeing it through someone else, and you are led to believe all the way through this movie that he is the most important character in this movie. And then when the most important fucking question in the entire fucking film comes up, which is, well, why did you keep the hotel? You expect him to say Gustav, but he doesn't. He says it's because of her. Like, but then you don't see anything of their relationship afterwards. It's almost like a literal pulling the rug underneath the viewer's feet.
Yeah.
Again, I feel like maybe I'm missing something because I need to watch the film more and read more essays. But it's like that same question at the end of Life Aquatic, whether or not he should have cut, but we ran out of dynamite. I almost feel like this is another one of those like subverting expectations lines that he's going to give you this really, really meaningful moment when you, the viewer, are expecting him. This is your reward.
For it, yeah.
This is your reward. You want Zero to turn around and say, I kept this hotel because of how much Gustav taught me and everything that he did for me. But then he doesn't give it. The writers don't give it to you. They give you a different line. You know?
Yeah.
Strange. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I'm quite conflicted about it. It's one of the reasons why the ending falls flat for me.
Yeah, it's almost like a final not misstep. It's like getting to the end of the stairs and the last step not being there.
Was he really that inconsequential? He died inconsequentially. Was he really that inconsequential? What did Agatha do that was so important in those 2 years? It's the mother of a child, his child. Okay, fine. But, you know, he went on this massive adventure with Gustav. He made him who he is.
Yeah.
And Gustav represents the nostalgia of, like, that kind of man. You know, he's not, like, let's say, a laser-bow crackhead.
No, he's a firecracker. He gets things done.
He's in a trade, right? He's performing a trade that he is absolutely and completely and utterly, totally dedicated to. So dedicated to it that he does absolutely anything. Don't get me wrong, he's not perfect. He sleeps with his clients and whatever and whatever.
He does it for the love of it. He loves it.
Exactly. He's so dedicated to it, and he does it so earnestly and so honestly, so much pathos. You know, you completely believe in him and believe him.
I love those little sequences where it shows the staff eating dinner, and he is just adamant that he is going to read his poetry and his verses.
So
And
good.
as he's talking, they're kind of like waving him to just bring up the plate, so he's going to be here
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah. It's like they like start eating and handing the plates out when he looks down to read, isn't it? You can imagine him looking at, and they go. He carries on reading, and then they're like, yeah, it's just, he's clearly more passionate about that job than anyone else. This is another film. When researching it, authors that I have not read were mentioned, so like it's hard to cross reference really. You know what inspired this. I read a specific author that was heavily influential on this story. So I don't know them, so I can't comment. But all you can do is comment on what's in it. But yeah, this is a great character that I had the utmost pleasure like enjoying on screen. You know, and Ralph Fiennes absolutely knocks it out of the fucking park. My God, what a performance! You know?
One of my favourite sequences with him, and him and Zero specifically, was just after he's broken out of the prison when he meets back up with Zero. And he's
How
turning
funny! I'm sorry, right? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but talk about physical comedy. How funny is it the way they break out that fast-paced, like tapping with the fucking ticking time? Every single time you get that quick cut, it's them going.
And that shot where one of the gang members they open up a hatch and discover that it's a guard room full of guards playing cards. And one of them just looks around, pulls out a knife, jumps in the hole, and you hear just a scuffle from seeing the point of view of them witnessing it. Then you lead into the shot of everyone stabbed to death, and Gustav goes, "I guess you'd call that a draw, then, wouldn't you?"
Absolutely. The comedy, whether it be one-liners or dialogue or physical, you know,
the tone is the pacing is perfect. Yeah,
pitch perfect. This film is the perfect representation of Wes Anderson's style for me. Perfect.
Yeah,
it is perfect up until the end. You know, it doesn't need to have like heavy themes that are sugar-coated with whimsy, because it's just telling this really thrilling story about this really fascinating character that you're interested in watching on screen be a Wes Anderson character in this Wes Anderson world. You know, talking about miniatures, you know, like the shots of the Budapest hotel itself are like beautiful. The model is absolutely beautiful. The interior design is incredible. You know, I said the Royal Tenenbaums has got incredible interior design. This film is like taking it to the next level. I actually loved how the elevators, you know, that are like deep dark red with like the purple like concierges like being the elevator controller. Do you know what that reminded me of?
Yeah, what's that?
It reminded me of like Cadbury chocolate, you know, machines. Do you remember them? The red ones that you used to fill with like the miniature Cadbury's milk bars.
Yeah, with the little draw tray and everything.
That's right. You put a coin in, they pop out. I don't know why. I just made me think of that. But I thought, what a striking colour, the red and the purple, and like the look of the hotel, like the rooms. Like when it showed their rooms, like they lived in squalor, but the rest of the hotel is just absolutely stunning. The detail, the sets, the objects, like, you know, like, oh my God, man! I wanted to live in that world. I wanted to be in that world. It was absolutely stunning. Absolutely incredible. It made me want to be a concierge at the Budapest Hotel. Truth be told.
Oh, bringing you back just quickly to the point I was making about the escape from the prison.
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, sorry. Well, there's a tangent and a half. My God, I went from fucking to that.
Yeah, I'm just going to lasso you and drag you back to.
Thank you very much. Deservedly so.
But the point I was making was referring to the fact that it's one of the few times in the movie when you actually see Gustav snap and his veneer breaks, and it's when he discovers that after the fact that Zero has forgotten a number of items, including things like disguises and clothing, he realizes he's forgotten his bottle of Lady Panache, which this fictional perfume must smell fucking fantastic because everyone loves this stuff there. Now, at this point, he loses it a little. He goes off on a quite significant rant where he tears chunks out of Zero's hide over the fact that he's an utter failure. How could he come to this country and bring his failure with him? And why didn't you stay in your own country? At which point we get the revelation, well, it's not so much a revelation, it's been alluded to in the past, but it truly gets defined here that Zero's lost his entire family to war. and he's in actual fact a refugee, not just an immigrant. And it's the rapid but measured shift and change in Gustav's demeanor as he goes from outraged to regretful. And he unashamedly apologizes for the way in which he's spoken and hugs him. And it didn't take anything away from it. It wasn't a break of his character or anything. It just felt perfectly natural. That is how he'd respond in that situation. And yeah, I don't know. That sequence, I really liked it. All it was is just him being angry, then being regretful. But the way in which he demonstrated that shift, whilst at the same time maintaining his...
He's a great actor. A great actor.
Yeah.
But again, though, that correlates with what I was saying to you earlier on about all the other characters are not really important. It's about how they interact with Gustav and how Gustav reacts to them, you know.
Yeah.
What's important about that scene is, yes, Zero is what he is and went through what he is, but it's that character rebound that Gustav goes through at that moment, you know. It's great. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
So one other thing I did note about this movie also is that there's a bit of a departure from previous Anderson movies, wherein he normally likes to use pop music from the 60s to the 70s. This didn't have any of that. It's more of an orchestral theme to this movie.
Alexandre Desplat, who's an incredible composer, I think this film benefited from it. I loved the jazzy score that really worked well with its time period and the caper, you know, escape from prison motif that he's using. Very fitting music. I thought it worked very well.
Yeah, the entirety of the movie is it's timeless to that end. It's just there's once again, whilst it does kind of allude to times in the 30s and the 60s and stuff like that, it's not a hard and fast rule for it. Those times aren't really that relevant. They're just the fact that they're meant to be separation of eras, really, rather than actual specific years.
Well, it's like you know that the sequence with the author is like the 80s, 85. And so, and if Jude Law is interviewing the, you know,
I believe it's 68. I think it was
60 in the 60s, you know, and if he's
And
old there, then if Mustafa's old there, then what? It must have happened in the 20s, you know.
Yeah.
So, which makes sense because it sort of has a bit of an Art Deco look about it all,
Yeah.
you know. So, which is one of the reasons why I love the look of it. I absolutely love the era. There are some artists that I've read that were referenced as the prime inspiration for the interior design, but again, these are artists I don't know. I can't say. I'm not educated in them, so you know. I liked it. I liked it a lot.
And also, just to allude to one or two shockingly savage moments that took place in the movie. The way in which Defoe dispatches that cat, did not see that coming.
Anything. Defoe is great in this. He's typecast as fuck, but very funny. You know, when he kills his sister. Oh god, that's fucking.
And when he takes out Kovacs by when he first slams his fingers in that door.
Oh, the fingers. Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
He is just so utterly sinister, but I don't think he has more than about 6 or 7 lines in this entire movie.
Doesn't need it.
But all he does is just glower at the camera on a couple of occasions. Well, that sequence where they all start punching each other, and it just ends with Zero being punched out by Jopling, and he just brings his fists up, all covered in rings, and just stares into the camera. Which, yeah, it looks absurd. But somehow it works.
It's funny, mate. It's funny. It's absurd and funny.
Yeah, he's very much a step to one side compared to what he was playing in the previous movie. This character had no sort of depth to him. He is purely just a killer, and he plays it well. So, whilst you might say that a character like that wouldn't need too much brought to it, he still gives it his all. Did he sharpen down his teeth for the role or something?
It looked like it. It looked like
it.
Yeah.
That was creepy as all fuck. So, yeah, once again, a movie which has certain paternal qualities, wherein the way in which he views Zero after a while, when he starts referring to him as the fact that he's going to become his heir, and that's what keeps him involved in the caper, whilst they're still on the run. There are certain ties to the fact that this is once again a man who Well, this is different compared to the others, I suppose, because this is a man who wasn't looking for like a son or anything like that. He didn't care for that life. But in Zero, I think because he found a kindred spirit, maybe not as a son, but more as an apprentice. Someone he wanted to see carry on his work. I don't know.
No, yeah, I'd say that, you know, by the end of the movie, when they're on the train, and he like, he doesn't give him. He offers, what does he offer him? 10%, isn't it?
Oh
Of
no, he
what?
offers him 1.5 and he asks for
1.5.
10.
That's it. That's right. That's right. You know what I mean? Like,
And he goes, "Oh, how about 10?" He goes, "Oh, don't be so absurd. The dealer won't get 10%.
yeah,
So, I
But
offer you
he offered-
1.5 and I shall make you my heir." So,
yeah, and he makes him his heir though, right there and then. Of everything. So which was a very nice decision in the grand scheme of things.
yeah, it ties together everything and it gives them a connection in that regard as well. Well, it's almost like that's as close to paternal as a professional man like him can be.
That's right. That's right.
He's not going to start sort of asking about his feelings or anything like that, because that wouldn't be proper, because they are still employees in the Grand Budapest Hotel. But this is as close as he will allow it to go, and for him, that's a big step. So yeah, as you say, Gustav is he's got the most depth in this, and for a short time, you do see him get his happy ending, where he's rich and blonde. But
Again, weird, dreamlike.
yeah, what was that about?
Like I said, again, it's a story being told, and sometimes we remember the past how we want to remember it. And I imagine that maybe Zero, Mr. Mustafa, when he saw Gustav finally, get what he wanted and get everything, he imagined him like, some angelic creature with blonde hair.
Yeah. I do like this movie, man. When I first saw this movie, I hyped it up to everybody. I kind of wish I hadn't, to a degree, because
You've always been guilty. You've always been guilty of that, though, mate.
Yeah, this resonated with me because I'd never watched anything like this movie before. This was a total sort of like new type of movie for me in terms of this kind of absurdist art house style. The way in which everything was framed, the way the story played out, the narrative choices, which sometimes they are jarring, sometimes they are confusing, but it is still a complete story. And I do know on more than one occasion I showed it to people who kind of watched it, got to the end, and just kind of that was interesting, Mark. I was like, this kind of movie probably wasn't made for you. And I don't mean that as an insult. I don't mean you didn't get it or anything like that. What I mean is that this isn't a movie for everybody.
None of his work is for everyone.
No. There are some that can see the style as being a little pretentious in terms of like the way in which it sort of like sends itself up, but other people love it because it kind of immerses itself in its own style and its own
The question
universe.
of like pretense, like I don't think that he is a pretentious director, because his films are imbued with like strong thematic elements. It's just sometimes when people think someone is pretentious, don't get me wrong, there are pretentious people out there, but I think often when people mistakenly view something or someone as being pretentious, it's because they don't operate on the same level emotionally or intellectually. And I'm not saying they're less intelligent, I'm just saying they're not operating on the same wavelength.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be on a certain wavelength, to appreciate Wes Anderson, as maybe will be quite, obvious by this point. I am way more critical of him than you are. You're a much bigger fan of his work than I am.
Oh, absolutely. I take it for what it is. And so I don't critique it too hard. I just enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. And there are certain, as I said, like for me, like that last line of dialogue in this film, when you find it really ruins the film for me. Actually, really ruins it for me. I thought it was actually mishandled.
Yeah.
And same as with Murray, and the same with Zissou, with the Life Aquatic. But the funny thing is, Mark, is that I actually think this film has got lighter themes overall than Life Aquatic. But I think this is the better film.
As you say, it gets the perfect balance between there being sort of like, at least for the majority of the narrative, it has got that absurd whimsical quality, and you say the caper feeling of like them rushing from set piece to set piece.
It just works. It just works so well. Like, it's all so harmonious. Works very, very well. It's funny.
And every actor's performance, I mean,
Yeah, they're all
as you
good.
say, they all sort of play their parts. And as you say, whilst the characters themselves may not have much depth, the people that are committing to the roles, like
Oh yeah, they're all
Adrian
fantastic.
Brody, is a
Yeah,
fantastic.
he's really fun in this. He's really fun.
Yeah, he doesn't get too much screen time, but what he does get, he makes full. Takes a full bite out of the scenery whilst he's doing it.
Yeah, he's good fun in this.
Yeah. So out of these three movies, which would you say is your favourite? Would it be Budapest?
It's difficult to say, mate. You know, the Life Aquatic, I think, is the thematically richer film of the three because it resonates with me more personally. But I think this is the better film of the three. Yeah. You know, I'd be more inclined to show this to people than the other two. You know.
Yeah, I consider this. I mean, this doesn't have that kind of comical awkwardness as much as Aquatic did.
Yes, because it hasn't got Bill Murray. It's for starters, and Royal Tenenbaums has got a lot of that awkwardness, hasn't it? Because of the kids. The kids are all awkward and broken.
Fiennes just oozes charm.
Yes.
He invites you in and wants you to sort of like.
Yeah, that's the character he's supposed to be. You know, that's what I mean. This film is a character study of a character who might not even exist.
Yeah.
Because it's through the perspective of a secondary, narrator. You know.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it interesting. Do people like that even exist? Is it even realistic to expect people like that to exist in real life?
No, is he almost an ideal in his own right?
Yeah, is
like
he exactly
perfect concierge?
Yeah, imagine it. You know, it's because of that. I said you can because he's like so unbelievably incredible that it makes him less relatable. But I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just different. It's just different. You know. Watching Fiennes is an absolute joy.
Yeah,
absolutely makes this movie. I think he's the best performance of the three films as well that I've seen of Wes Anderson.
Coming to this, I've not seen too much of his work prior, and mainly seeing him as Voldemort. That whiplash made it all the more enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to see that he can shift it so far removed from that, and as you say, that he'd been typecast because of his casting and because of his performance, even. Mm-hmm. You can see the joy that's on him's face to be immersing himself in something other than villain. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, this movie was a joy for me the first time I watched it. Utterly blew me away.
I liked it. I remember liking it the first time. I'm pretty sure we had a dinner party at yours and we watched it years and years ago.
Yeah, you might have been among the crowd of people that I inflicted this movie upon.
Yeah, so I still like it. I still think it's a great movie, you know? So.
Yeah. Okay,
but it's not perfect. It's not a perfect movie. But I would probably say it's the perfect Wes Anderson movie that I've seen anyway so far of the few that I've seen. You know,
if you were to turn around to someone, you want to watch a Wes Anderson movie, watch this one.
I'd probably say watch this one.
Yeah. So that's it. The podcast is finished. For info on the music we've used, please see the episode description. You can follow Gavin at writer GM Groves on Twitter/X, Facebook, and Instagram. Gavin, where can they find me?
Sorry, I wasn't expecting that. That's not how I scripted it. That was very good. That's very good. That's so good. No, I'm just going to leave it like that. I can't even answer it. Well done, mate. Well done.
They've still yet to find me, haven't they?
They'll never find you. Carry on.
And if you want to read Gavin's work, check out his website in the podcast episode description. There you will find articles, reviews, and some fiction here and there. Without further ado, I will bid you farewell, and I will hopefully see you soon.
Catch you later.